Good evening, everybody. Hopefully there's plenty of seats. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being here. So we will have the call to order.
Councilmember Keener.
Here.
Councilmember Neihardt is excused. Councilmember Irvin.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill. Here. Mayor Degree.
Present. I was going to give you my name, but okay. For the public, I forgot to mention that this is an extra city council meeting. This is July 21st, 2016. And so we will have the salute to the flag led by Councilman Keener.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we have no closed session report. Do I need to ask you that? No. No consent items, and we are going to oral communications directly. Are okay with that? So remember that oral communications means nothing that's already on the agenda. So anything about the library, which is our main focus today. So if you have anything else, hopefully it's short and sweet so that we can get started. And if there's anybody that wants to talk about anything else that's not on tonight's agenda. So do we have a card coming up for our agenda? Okay. So if that person could start coming forward.
Oral communications.
Oral.
So this is for Teresa Dyer. Please come forward.
Good evening, City Council. Teresa Dyer, 1408 Crespi Drive. I checked with the police chief there, and he said we could make out two cards, one for oral communications and the other one for the library. So I want to address this under the oral communications. After reading the Pacific Tribune here and the report on the library, I find it, more or less, I have a suggestion regarding our city attorney's mistake for not informing the city council that they needed 4 people to vote on this issue.
Let me check for a minute.
So I hope
Teresa,
there's no...
Hold on, Teresa, for a minute. You're okay with, is this okay right now at this point? Or should it wait for the library?
It's part of the
I'm just going to make a suggestion about our city attorney who made the mistake in the first place and who also is not very clear on the initiative that she put on the ballot for the quarry. And if she can't do the job, then I think, well, wait a minute, I think we ought to outsource it and get San Mateo County. They have 25 attorneys there. Okay? Thank you.
All right, I was just trying to clarify. All right, thank you very much. Public comment also, Bill Collins.
I'm not going to use the L word, don't worry.
Yeah, thank you.
Sue, last week you brought up what I think is the most important issue facing Pacific, and it's how people get around. This town is so car dependent, it's pathetic. And when you schedule meetings, I think you don't think about the people, the thousands and thousands of our neighbors who do not drive cars. They're old people, they're young people, they're disabled, they're too poor to have a car. The goal-setting meeting was off the highway. Nobody walks there, nobody bikes there, nobody took the bus there. Everybody at this meeting, I'll bet, came here by car. It's not a bad thing, but let's look forward, as you were, Sue. Some of us want to live in this city in our dotage, and how are we going to get around? And I think those are obstacles to some of the things you're talking about citing, which I'm not going to reference but specifically, but these are worth considering when we plan what kind of a Pacifica we're going to have today and in the future, is how people get around. I remember when I first moved here, I was going to go to a Giants game, and I looked up the bus schedule. Oh, runs once an hour. Well, so much for the bus. I've never been on a bus in San Mateo County. It's just too bad. You know, it's just so infrequent, and I'd like us to have a better public system, and we're lacking that. I'm not going to belabor the point, but Sue, thank you for bringing that up, and it's just something we need to work on. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. Is there anybody else that have wanted to say something that's not on the agenda? All right, I think that's Dan. Come on up. Anybody else?
Thanks for hearing me tonight, council members. My name is Dan Stedgink. I just want to speak for a couple seconds about the financial opportunities we missed in the last year. Between January 2014 and June 2015, San Mateo County handed out $40 million in priority redevelopment area monies to every city. When I called the county and asked, what was Pacifica's share, and I asked to see our submission, we never even applied for that money. This January, the deadline expired for us to apply for the redevelopment agency refunds on there. Pacifica didn't apply for $3.9 million in monies that we were owed. Towns like Brisbane applied and got, over $2 million simply with a one-page application there. Also want to call attention to a record the city set. As of, I believe, 2 days ago, it's been officially 128 days since a 7-Eleven was last robbed in this town. Of course, it reset again to 0 last week, so we just might want to take a look at what we're bringing into town. In the last 48 months, we haven't brought a single business into town that's paid more than $10 an hour. 7-Eleven's at $9.49 an hour. Grocery outlet, it's $9.68 an hour. And these weren't new businesses. These were just replacements. They replaced a Chevron and they replaced a Fresh and Easy. When we're looking where we're going to put new companies in here, taking a look at, affordable jobs that pay a living wage here, might be a good idea, not just national chains that are shipping the money out of town and aren't really doing anything but paying low wages to people who can't afford to live here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please don't clap. Okay, just a reminder, some of you may be new to city council meetings. We actually do not clap as much as you would like to, and I repeat as I did before. I understand the enthusiasm or the concern, so there's other ways of showing that you really like what somebody says, so if you would just, thumbs up or raise your hands or something as quietly as possible, I'd appreciate that. So that's just to keep order and the agenda moving, and we are all courteous people, so if you keep that in mind, thank you. Otherwise, I have to say something, and I don't like doing that. So I appreciate that. So we are now, I don't see anybody else, right? Okay. Is that a person that wants to say something? When we're looking back there, all we can see is dark figures. I think somebody, are you coming up? Oh, okay. All right. So seeing nobody else wants to speak on something not on the agenda, we'll close that and bring it to council communications. And before we move on, I just wanted to say, I think we should make it clear that Councilwoman Nyhart is not here because she's not allowed to be here, because she lives within the 500-foot area of the library project proposed very close to her house. So she's not allowed in the room. So it's just so you know that. Okay. So anybody, council, want to say anything? Anybody, council? Okay, so then I'll take the privilege of one more thing. Our neighboring city, Millbrae, their community center is destroyed. So we've already sent out our condolences for that. So, and we're not sure, but there was a big fire. What happened? So, okay, all right. So let's move on. Any staff communications at this point? No, thank you. All right, thank you. We have no public hearing, but we are now in consideration item. Let me make sure that I did everything. Okay, so tonight our main thing is the reconsideration of council decision regarding the resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand for the construction of a new Pacifica Public Library in its financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds. So the proposed action is 1, and then there's an A and a B. Adopt a motion to reconsider the council's June 11, 2016 decision regarding the resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand construction of a new public library and its financing through issuance of general obligation bonds, and if approved by majority vote, take one of the following actions. A and B, adopt a resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand the construction of a new public library and the financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds, or do not put a bond measure on the November ballot. And there's a lot of reputation there, but that's because it's all legal sort of stuff. So do you want to go through the reasoning for the type of votes that we have to, by type of votes, I mean majority, unanimous, that sort of thing? Do you want to make that clear for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I would like to go through to make sure that everybody, the public and the council, is aware of what our authority is to be here tonight and what actions we're asking the council to take. At the council's July 11th meeting, the council was taking the first steps to put on the ballot a library bond measure. One of the actions at that meeting involved adoption of a resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demanded the construction of a new public library. That resolution was voted on with a 3-to-1 vote and 1 abstention. Unfortunately, at that meeting, my office failed to inform the council that that vote was not sufficient to pass the resolution. That resolution required 4 votes of the council. It requires a 2/3 vote of the entire council, not just of the council present. So with that in mind, and when I found out about this, I started to have discussions with the city manager about what to do. At that point, the city manager, in consultation with the mayor, determined that there was a necessity to call a special meeting, because I had determined that, in fact, there was an ability to have a reconsideration of this item, so that should the council choose to do that. So the mayor, in consultation with the city manager, scheduled this special meeting, which is under the authority of the Brown Act and the Government Code, the city is allowed to do. Now, with regard to the motions on the agenda, the council's first action would be to adopt a motion of reconsideration, which the council has the authority to do under its rules. That motion requires a simple majority vote, meaning it would take 3 council members to adopt that resolution, that motion to reconsider the resolution. Now, if that motion were in fact passed by a majority, it is then that the council could then actually deliberate on the resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand the construction of a new public library. So what we are going to be doing tonight is, when I've concluded my introductory statements, staff, Ms. Wehrmeister is going to be presenting her staff report with regard to certain aspects of the bond measure itself. And then we will then be turning it back to the council for questions. We will then have public comment, and then it will come back to the council depending upon the council's desires. And then at that point, the council can determine first the motion to reconsider, and then if approved by a majority vote, then the council will then be able to move on to the next measure, which is adoption of the resolution itself.
Right. Yeah, so the motion to reconsider is passed by a majority vote, which would be 3
Correct.
out of the 4 of us.
Correct.
Okay. And then, when does the 4 out of 4 come into place?
So if that motion to reconsider passes, then the council would have the authority to go to the second step, which is actually to consider the resolution. And at that point, if there is a motion to adopt the resolution, that motion would have to pass
4 to 4.
by 4 votes or a unanimous vote of the council members present.
Right. So I had attended, doing some more study, and had attended a sea level rise meeting on the 20th, and I came up with a thought that I hadn't had before, which would be in addition to the resolution. When do I present that to
That would be
council?
after the motion for reconsideration.
So I guess why I'm bothered by that a little bit is because then the council doesn't have that part of the resolution, so they're not voting on it. They don't know that they're voting.
Because you're not voting on the resolution
Oh,
in
just
the first
voting on the
motion. You're
right-
just voting about whether or not you want to consider.
I got you.
Okay.
I guess, but even so, if I wanted to reconsider something, I would like to know what I'm reconsidering. But I guess I'm having a squabble with the law. Okay, never mind. But think about that. All right, so we're good?
I'm here to answer any questions, but now we would like, unless there are specific questions related to what I just discussed, I'd like to turn it over to our planning director, who has additional comments related to the bond measure.
Okay, so I have one light. Are you ready for this? Okay, Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill?
So I just wanted to clarify, a yes vote means we will hear item number 2, library reconsideration. A no vote means this meeting's over and we're done, right?
On the first motion to reconsider.
motion,
If
yes.
we do not get a majority vote on the motion to reconsider, then there is nothing further to do, and the meeting will
Adjourn.
adjourn.
And that's 3 votes, remember?
Yeah.
And I just had one question. In terms of public comment, so what we'll do is we'll discuss strictly the first motion and then take public comment before we determine
We are going
whether...
to take public comment after staff report.
Only if we reconsider.
After questions, and after the staff report and council questions, before the council deliberates on either motion.
Okay, that's all I wanted to...
So in other words, the mayor has not as much power as you like to think. So, all right, are we good to go now? Okay, thank you. Please.
Just going to wait for my presentation. So, thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Tina Wermeister. I'm the Planning Director. And I'm going to summarize the library project's history, progress on implementation of the Council's direction last November, and staff's recommendation. And then City Manager Tinfo will provide responses to questions that were posed on July 11th. And then Dilip Trivedi from the firm Moffitt & Nichol will summarize findings of the coastal hazard study prepared for the project site, which is also in response to questions that came up on the 11th.
Petrified.
Okay, I turned it on. Thank you. So the City of Pacifica has been working towards constructing a new single up-to-date library to meet our community's needs for more than a decade. The process of moving towards a new library began in the late 90s when the City of Pacifica joined a number of other cities in San Mateo County to form the San Mateo County Library Joint Powers Authority. The JPA board envisioned each community having one library that could optimize the service resources available. As part of joining the JPA, Pacifica agreed to move forward combining library services into a single facility designed to meet the needs of the entire community. So since that time, the Pacifica Library Foundation, the Pacifica Friends of the Library, the San Mateo County Library JPA, and San Mateo County and the city have been working together to take the steps needed to make a new library a reality. Those include community outreach, planning studies, a needs assessment, and conceptual building design. The results of the planning and community outreach efforts determined that the size of the current libraries is not adequate to serve the community's needs. A single centrally located modern facility would allow more open hours and materials and access to services and programs already offered in other communities with up-to-date facilities. The site at Palmetto and Montecito and Sharp Park was selected because the area is conveniently accessed from Highway 1 and Sharp Park Road, which are the roads used most by residents to commute, shop, and meet other needs. I'd like to add that it was also determined that the existing Sharp Park Library site was not a preferred site because of the size and not being able to accommodate easily and cost-effectively the size of the library the community needed with parking. And this slide shows that the material circulation pattern and that residents from throughout the city are already using the Sharp Park Library with the centrally located location. So on November 23rd of last year, the council directed staff to take several actions towards constructing a new library. And I just wanted to go through those really quickly. So one of them was to take the steps needed to hire an architecture firm to do the schematic design phase. That's completed, and council authorized the city manager to enter into a contract with Group 4 on the 11th. The council created a library advisory committee, and the tentative first meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday. As part of the polling services, we contracted with the financial service advisor to provide and develop various tax scenarios. We engaged a polling firm to conduct a survey of the community. You heard a summary of those survey results on the 11th. And lastly, the last item is for the council to consider placing a bond measure on the November ballot, which is what you are here to reconsider this evening. So I just wanted to summarize the factors that staff considered in making the recommendation to place the item on the November ballot. First, as I mentioned, council received a summary of community survey results from the survey firm on the 11th. And while the 2/3 threshold was not reached, the survey results indicate that the library services are valued in this community, and a focused, dedicated campaign by community supporters could yield positive results. The demographic profile of the voters surveyed indicates that a presidential election would attract more likely bond measure supporters, and the 2016 voter turnout is predicted to be high. The City Council had created a library subcommittee, including Councilmember Irvin and Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill. Staff and the polling consultant provided a summary of survey results to the subcommittee and received concurrence with the recommendation to move forward with a bond measure in November. And in keeping with the first point that the community values library services, community organization and stakeholder support is significant and has been consistent for this project. As I mentioned, those organizations, including the Pacifica Library Foundation and the Pacifica Friends of the Library, have been working towards a modern library for more than a decade. And partner agency stakeholders, including San Mateo County and San Mateo County Library, has notably supported the project in financially, including a grant of $500,000 for planning and architectural work, a pledged contribution of approximately $1.5 million for furnishings for the new library, the past transfer of ownership to the city of the 2 existing library sites, with the understanding that the sites would be sold and the proceeds applied to the cost of a new facility. And most recently, the county has offered a low-interest loan towards project construction, which you'll hear about more in just a bit. And lastly, the other factor, as I mentioned, is the Moffitt and Nichols study confirmed that the site is suitable for a library project. So in summary, staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution determining that the public necessity, interest and necessity demand the construction of a new Pacifica library. And so I'd like to turn it over now to City Manager Tinfo, who will go over some responses to some of the questions that came up at the last meeting.
Thanks, Tina. As she said, darn it, there we go. So I reflected on what we heard at the last meeting and thought I would put together some information, mostly financial, that could hopefully address some of the questions that were raised by council members. The first one, so there's 5. The first one is what would the proposed bond measure include in terms of principal and interest? So I've got some information for the council on that issue. What's the value of the 2 existing property sites and how could the sale proceeds be used? Oh, come on.
Here he comes to the rescue.
Technology is a wonderful thing, except for when it's not. How could we use the county's offer of a loan for part of the cost? How much does it cost for operations of the 2 existing libraries? And then sea level rise has been raised as a risk to the library site. What do we know about that? So let's just take number one. The principal that's been proposed for the bond measure is $33.5 million. I think everybody's very clear on that. And that would cover the planning costs, the construction, furniture and equipment, and the bond fees. The interest rate that was used to generate the scenario that we tested and that we've put forward is 4.25%. Now, of course, we won't know the true interest rate until we actually go out to the bond market, but this is the one that our consultant recommended we use to test. The total repayment over 30 years would be $66 million approximately. So then a bit more on that. That would, the bond measure itself would be approximately $23 per $100,000 assessed valuation. And the average assessed valuation of single-family residents in Pacifica is $410,000. So just to note, it's not the market rate, it's not the market value, it's the assessed valuation that everybody pays taxes on currently. And so you multiply approximately 4 times the 23, and you get $93 a year for that particular household. Moving to question number 2, what's the value of the 2 existing library sites and how could the sale proceeds be used? So it depends on how the property could be used, whether it's to build housing, for a restaurant, for a hotel, for shopping. Those different land uses would then create different values for the properties. And also when we put it on the market. Now, ostensibly, we wouldn't be putting the properties on the market until the new library was open, and that would be several years from now. So we're not expected to sell it until then, and right now the economy is strong, but we really don't know in the future what the value of the properties might be. An estimate, just to give you a sense though, talking to, again, our financial consultant, is somewhere between $2 million to $5 million for both.
Total?
Total, for both properties. Question number 3, how could we use the county's offer of a loan for part of the cost? And at the last meeting, I mentioned that this was complicated, and I'll try to offer further explanation on that point. So just to recap what they offered, 25% of the construction costs, so not the total project, but just the construction portion, with a 0.8% interest rate and for 15 years. So the loan amount is likely to be somewhere between $5 to $6 million, just looking at only the construction costs. And then the source of the repayment for that loan would either be bond measure proceeds or property sale proceeds. We don't have access to additional funds, at least not right now, that would allow us to repay that loan from any other source that I can see at this time. And details need more time to determine. And number 4, how much does it cost to operate the 2 existing libraries? So I checked with the library JPA staff, and each library cost about $1 million a year to operate. As you know, the San Mateo Library JPA provides the staff and the materials for both libraries. That $1 million a year at each does not include the maintenance, and as you know, because we provide that. And then sea level rise has been raised as a risk to the library site, and sort of what do we know about that? As you know, we performed the environmental analysis for this site some time ago, and it determined that the library was a suitable land use for the site, as well as the other uses for the site that have been envisioned and that we're also working on. However, sort of in an abundance of caution, we decided to bring in another consultant to, with fresh eyes, look at the site, and that the company is Moffitt & Nichol. And they have done an update, not of that full analysis, but simply looking at this site through the lens of sea level rise and tsunami risk. And so Dilip Trivedi is here, and he's going to make a presentation of that study. The full report was included as part of your packet, both on July 11th and with this packet. So with that, I'll invite him to come up to the podium and take over. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Lori. Good evening, Council.
Are you-
Is better? Okay, all right.
And raise your hands if you can't. I think I can at least see hands waving. Go ahead. You're good.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Good evening, Council. This is forward. Okay, perfect. Thank you. My name is Dilip Trivedi. I'm with Moffett & Nichol. I thought I'd just introduce. right, let me
I would
move
say
this.
much louder.
Let me move this really close to my
Right.
mouth. Is that better? Everyone can hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dilip Trivedi with Moffett & Nichol. I am a coastal engineer working in the Bay Area for the past 25 years or so, primarily dealing with coastal and shoreline issues in the Bay and along the coastline. My primary area of practice is in urban development, coastal trail, and wetlands restoration, ecosystem-based. I thought I'd introduce a little bit about the firm. We're a firm, a California-based firm, been in practice for about 70, we celebrated our 70th anniversary last year. Widely recognized as one of the largest marine engineering firms. That is our only practice, wherever land meets water, ports, harbors, shorelines, and wetlands. Multiple offices. Again, our offices are along both coastlines only. We're a mid-sized firm. Our typical clients are city, county governments, natural resource agencies for the state, the federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, state governments, nonprofits such as Ducks Unlimited and others, the National Park Service, and private industry. I thought I'd go into the scope of work. It was a fairly expedited effort that was conducted. Listing the scope, we looked at the earlier analysis that was completed for the EIR. We reassessed the exposure of the site to extreme water levels, storm waves, primarily in the light of recent damage that has occurred and recent events that have occurred along the California coastline. Tsunamis, again, the 2011 tsunami reminded us of the risk that we are here on the open coast. And then updated estimates of sea level rise that had been produced by the state and the National Research Council for the west coast of California. We used that information to identify risks related to coastal flooding and to bluff retreat. And then using that information, documenting the coastal hazards, comparing it to what was done earlier, and provide a high-level basis for the development potential of the site for the planned uses. So with that, getting down into specifics itself, we looked at the 3.5-acre site between Beach Boulevard and Palmetto, south of Montecito, where we are. There's a phenomenal amount of information that is available for the general public. Again, this was data that was available to us from the United States Geological Survey. It's a very high-resolution topographic map of the site. The site shows elevations, and I'm going to go into a fair amount of detail into the elevations itself and comparing them to water surface elevations and wave elevations. The site in general, if you ignore the pits, the prior tanks, in general the site ranges from 20 on the south end to about 26 along Montecito. Now, if you compare those two, it might be a little small for everyone in the audience, but I will read those numbers out to you. So 20 to 26 feet, all of these elevations are referring to the North American vertical datum. So in effect, it's the low tide, low water along the coastline here. So it's about 26 feet above low tide. high tide in this area is just a little bit above 5 feet. The extreme water level, which has occurred once in recent history, and that was in 1983 during the El Nino, is just shy of 9 feet. That's the extreme water level. The significant waves, and again, as I said, there's a fair amount of data that is available. This data that we looked at was the Cosmos 3 data produced by Scripps Institute of Oceanography in combination with the USGS. The nearshore wave heights, 100-year wave heights, off of this particular site itself is about 12 feet. I went through the site elevations, 20 to 26, and Beach Boulevard, running in front of the site, ranges from about 22 to 24 feet, same datum. The top of the seawall is about 26 feet. And so these numbers, I'll keep referring to some of these numbers through the rest of my slides. So it's important to at least look at the site relative to the top of the seawall. FEMA recently, and this, when I say recently, it's as recent as a few months, 2 months ago, have published preliminary maps for San Mateo County, which show the vulnerability of the entire county to the 100-year flooding event, whether it is caused by fluvial sources or by ocean wave sources. So the one on the panel on the left is a larger map. It covers the entire shoreline here from Sharp Park up north. And I zoomed in on the particular site and the area where the seawall exists. There's about 2,500-foot long seawall. FEMA's estimate, and so this is a very rigorous exercise that FEMA goes through. It took about 2 to 3 years for the coastal study to be produced. And they look at historic water levels, they look at historic storm surges, tides. All of that information is processed, and it's put through a rigorous exercise where they then determine what the 1% annual chance vulnerability event is. In other words, it is the event that has, on average, a 100-year return period. The elevation along the site right here, south of the pier, is marked as a zone VE with an elevation of 24. Zone VE is something that FEMA looks at, and the terminology refers to an event that is associated with storm waves. So the V is an abbreviation for velocity, is what they call. The E gives the elevation of the 100-year event. And so when they mark zone VE, it is the area that is exposed to greater than 3-foot waves, and the elevation that follows VE is the maximum elevation that is reached by the run-up associated with the waves and water levels. The mapping extent itself that they have shown here, being 24, it stops short, or it stops right at the seawall itself. It does inundate the beach, probably some of the rubble that exists at the toe of the seawall, but it stops right at the seawall itself. And the elevation of the wall and Beach Boulevard does not allow floodwaters to, again, this is a large amount of water, as in, at least 2% of the total water. So when we see inundation and wet areas along Beach Boulevard, that is the spray and the overtopping, some amount of overtopping, that FEMA does not consider to be significant enough that they would mark an area as a floodplain. What is not included in the FEMA flood maps are two phenomena. One is sea level rise, since this is for insurance purposes, FEMA has not gone to a point where they would adopt sea level rise as part of the maps itself. And they do not consider very infrequent events such as tsunamis, which have a very, very low probability of occurrence. So both of those are not included in these FEMA maps. So what we did was, and in the context of tsunami vulnerability, the state recently, and again recently is in the past 2 to 3 years, conducted extensive tsunami mapping and vulnerability assessments of the California coastline. And there were 2 events that they modeled. This model, and I'll call it the SAFR, again, it's open to public review. All of these documents are on the USGS websites. They show the inundation for this particular effort was an anniversary effort of the 1964 tsunami that had occurred, one of the largest tsunamis that has occurred on the California coastline. And so they modeled that same tsunami at a relatively high water level, which was just a little bit above high tide, to see what might happen if a similar kind of tsunami were to occur again. The probability of occurrence for that SAFR event is in the 200 to 250-year return period. And it's a composite of several different tsunamis to come up with the map that we see up here on the screen. But the inland extent of that purple area is about a 26-foot elevation. So it is right at the elevation of what the site is, what the top of the seawall is, and portions of Montecito Avenue itself. The state also conducted a separate, entirely different objective, but this was geared towards emergency planning and evacuation for residents, communities along the California coastline. And so they modeled something which was an extremely large, it was over a 9.2 earthquake in the Aleutian Islands, which generates tsunamis that the area here is most susceptible to. With that particular event, which is roughly, and I call it approximate, they have not assigned probabilities, but it's been widely recognized in speaking with the authors of the study itself that it is over a 1,000-year return period. For that particular event, the approximate depth is about 36 feet. It's about 10 feet of water on the site. Again, the primary focus of this was for communities to have evacuation routes, shelter locations, and to have the planning in place, the alert systems. We looked at that. Based on combination of water levels and waves and the beach condition that existed, we looked at the combined events where we added surge, storm waves, and water levels, and computed how high the water would reach. Without sea level, we were coming up with very similar numbers, almost the same numbers as what FEMA had produced, which was about 24 feet. Then we added in sea level rise, and I'm showing results here for 1, 2, and 3 feet. But we did the analysis all the way up to what the NRC documents have indicated, which is 5.5 feet. Those profiles, schematically, what we are showing is how high the water goes. With increasing amounts of sea level rise, you do start seeing overtopping of the existing seawall, assuming that the seawall is not improved beyond what it is right now. You start seeing increased amounts of spray, and beyond spray, it's actually water with almost every wave that would come in and flood the promenade and the beach boulevard. The extent of flooding is really was the subject of the analysis that we conducted. How much water over a discrete storm period would actually come in over the seawall and reach, and what kind of depths would be associated with that. That's the analysis that was conducted. I'm showing the transect where we did. And the numbers that we used are in the table that I'm showing up at top, which comes from the most recent and the state adopted. This is also the numbers that the Coastal Commission has adopted in their guidance document for coastal development permits. A maximum of 2 feet by mid-century. Most likely projection is about just under a foot. End of century numbers are about 3 feet, most likely scenarios. It could hypothetically go as high as 5.5 feet. And so we looked at all of these numbers and included them in the analysis, conducted the run-up, and the net results that we were showing, that we were coming up with, are shown in that blue band right there. The inland extent of that blue shading is the limit of run-up associated with 5.5 feet of sea level rise. The fundamental assumption in all of this analysis, both I think for the EIR, for the work we did, and for some of the work that has gone on in recent studies led by the Army Corps, has been the maintenance of the beach and seawall system. The seawall north of the pier, which has seen recent damage, and I think repeatedly so over the past few El Niños, is extremely different than the seawall south of the pier. As an engineer, I would probably characterize the wall north of the pier as a retaining wall, and the wall south of the pier as a seawall, which was engineered to withstand waves. It does protect critical assets. I understand that there are utility systems, there are emergency planning and emergency routes. USGS, in particular, and the Pacific Institute, which both of those studies had received wide attention in the media, had looked at what would Bluff Retreat look like if communities did not have the resources or they did not have the will to protect the shoreline systems that currently exist. This figure right here, the shading in red, is if the seawall were to collapse or to have failed and the bluff would have moved back, the inland extent at the end of the century with 5.5 feet of sea level rise is what was shown by USGS in these figures. I think the Pacific Institute did something similar, and they have maps which look quite similar to this. Coming back to what we are showing here, our fundamental assumption has been that Beach Boulevard is a critical enough asset for the city that sand would be placed in front of the beach, of the seawall. The seawall itself would be maintained. And with those two assumptions, our conclusion was that the site, not just the library, but the entire site, has potential for development. Addressing tsunamis is a design matter. The California Building Code does have criteria for looking at structures in a tsunami inundation zone. But inundation versus damage and life safety are where the building codes do emphasize. So the site, in conclusion, in our study, was that it has potential. Details need to be worked out in terms of the grading, the habitable quarters, and the location within the site itself. The local coastal plan that the city has, the policies would have to be adhered to. In general, residential uses, at least for the coastal development permit purposes, are not looked at very favorably in areas which are vulnerable even to an infrequent inundation like a tsunami. But industrial, commercial, and non-residential uses are looked at quite differently by the Coastal Commission. The last thing I'd like to note is the wall is protecting one of the most important assets as far as the Coastal Commission goes, and that is the coastal trail. Without the wall and the beach in front of it, the coastal trail would not exist. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation here. Open to discussion.
Thank you. Any questions folks want to ask a question? Councilmember Keener?
First of all, the figures that you gave on one of your first slides, the ones in the small table off to the side, there is yeah, right there. Are those additive or not?
No, these are absolute numbers relative to the NAVD datum.
Okay. And next, a few slides ahead to the overtopping. Yes, this one. You mentioned 5.5 feet and said that basically it would have no more risk of damage than what you show here, which is 3 feet. Is that right?
That's right. With increasing water levels or decreasing water levels, the individual contributions of waves versus tides differ quite a bit. So it's not intuitive, but with the lower water surface elevation, such as a low tide or a low sea level rise, the waves break farther offshore, and so the individual contribution of those waves together is a little less. With the high...
Excuse me, so the waves would be less likely to damage anything onshore if they're...
With lower sea levels.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right.
Yes, with higher sea levels, again, this is a static exercise which the coastal engineering community has been doing based on guidance, given by the Coastal Commission and the Army Corps of Engineers. In reality, the beaches, 100 years from now, we're assuming a static beach that exists today. And we know that a beach is not static even with seasonal changes. So with that assumption that we have had to do in here, we are seeing an increased amount of overtopping of the seawall with higher sea levels.
Okay.
Sufficient enough that it becomes very unsafe. I mean, it would become dangerous with existing top of seawall elevations for people to use the promenade. So some work would have to be done to continue pedestrian access.
Okay, some work on the seawall itself.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So regarding the work of the Pacific Institute, first of all, with respect to bluff erosion, I understand that that they did not consider the seawall in those estimates. Is that right?
That is correct. They did not let they used a long-term recorded rates of erosion. I think it was just under a foot over this last century. Over the recent past, over the last 3 decades or so, with the increased amount of El Niños that we have been seeing, the rate of erosion as measured north and south of this particular site, because with the seawall in place, you cannot really measure bluff erosion, but they use erosion rates that are farther up north and to the south to then put it, impose it onto this reach and ignore that the seawall is there, let the bluff continue eroding. They don't, completely analyze the geotechnical characterization. They don't characterize liquefaction potential or any other kind of rubble material that might be in the bluffs. We call it bluffs, but much of the bluff is really man-made, fill that has been placed, which constitutes the rubble today, to a bluff today.
Uh-huh.
So yes, they did not take a look. They did not assume that the seawall would continue being in place.
Could you go ahead to the slide that shows the bluff erosion? Yeah, that one.
Right.
And this is the USGS,
This is the USGS.
all right?
Correct.
So where would the Pacific Institute bluff erosion in the absence of the seawall fall on this map?
The USGS also assumed, as just like the Pacific Institute, they used a very similar methodology, at least in terms of the assumptions. The work that was done by USGS was much more deterministic, where they took individual contributions of 100-year waves, and so it was true 1%, just like FEMA does, but they evaluate what the extent of run-up associated with those events are, and then add in the recorded bluff erosion rates.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the...
They add the rate of bluff erosion to the inundation itself.
Oh, okay.
So over 100 years, I think that's what, I don't know the details about the actual study itself and how they have processed the information, but if we assume a foot long-term trend in bluff erosion over 100 years, that'd be 100 feet of erosion. If you just add 100 feet to the limit of run-up, in this case, I think the inland limit is about 200 feet from the seawall.
And where does that lie on, halfway along the Beach Boulevard property or
So
something
the proposed, let's see, this doesn't have a laser. The proposed library site, which would be just west of Palmetto, is about 350 feet. So I'd say Palmetto is about 400 to 410, 420 feet from the seawall at the
Okay.
moment.
So when I looked at the maps, I found that, to me, it looked as if on the Pacific Institute maps, it was the bluff erosion in the absence of the seawall, of course, was around Palmetto.
Whether there was bluff erosion or it was limit of inundation, I think,
It
separate
was bluff
things.
erosion. That was bluff erosion,
Okay,
I
so
think.
then,
yeah. The other question I have is relating to, well, I don't know whether you'd call it inundation or flooding, but the Pacific Institute again, show flooding over much or maybe all of the Beach Boulevard site in a 6.6 feet sea level rise scenario, and I'm not sure it's, I think it's 1%, 1% annual exceedance. I've forgotten exactly what the term is. And the access for the water in that scenario is south of the seawall. It's at the end of the seawall.
Yes, I've seen those maps that's coming in from the golf course and the lagoons there in the golf course itself, assuming that the embankment separating the golf course from the ocean is breached.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes,
that's it.
Yeah, those are the, under those circumstances, yes, it would be outflanked from the south side until it reaches, the tsunami maps, I think, are very nice because they give you, this is the daylighting. So this is 36 feet, which is an incredibly high number, compared to tidal inundation. This is more of the 26 feet, elevation.
Yeah.
The one thing to remember again is well, I won't say remember, but one thing of note is that in this profile, what I was showing and the way FEMA maps, the influence of wave-related overtopping, as the waves are crashing over the seawall, there is a inland limit extent to which, this inundation can go, inundation or flooding, that it can go to. Beyond a certain distance, it doesn't matter. I mean, the VE zone of 24 doesn't extend in a horizontal line, all the way out to 24. So the way FEMA will do insurance rate maps for properties along Palmetto, for example, they would look at the base flood elevation. At that point, by Palmetto, the wave action has been absorbed or has been adequately dissipated along Beach Boulevard. And at that point, it is the 9-foot elevation that applies. Add 6 feet of sea level rise, you would be at 15 feet of elevation with 6 feet of sea level rise, the base flood elevation.
And I'm sorry, I didn't follow quite what the point was of that last sentence or two.
It was that the coastal areas are going to see a higher amount of inundation, which decreases as you go farther away. And so looking at this 24-foot elevation, for example, and just extending it back mathematically or graphically is not accurate, because the effect of the waves quickly dissipates within 50 feet.
Right, I get that, but you said something following that?
It was the flood insurance rate for FEMA purposes. Palmetto, I haven't looked at the old flood maps, because the recent maps were only for the coastal area. But I would venture to say that the properties along Palmetto have a base flood elevation of about 9 at the moment. And with sea level rise, you just keep adding the sea level rise, the amount of waves or bluff erosion.
Okay.
As long as it's taken care of at that one block, it doesn't change.
I see. Okay, but that still doesn't address the sort of mechanism of flooding that the Pacific Institute is using. Am I right?
Yes. Now, again, the tsunami maps, I think, are a good topographical tool. So yes, even if the seawall is protected in this particular case, and the golf course's protection has completely failed, then water would come in from the south and outflank the seawall.
Okay. I think that's all I have, and thank you. Thank you for your explanations.
Very welcome.
Councilwoman Irvin? Thank you.
First off, I'd just like to thank you for that in-depth report. I think that's something I think all of us and the public just really want, a very clear understanding of the risks involved in this site, sea level risks, tsunami risks, and I really want to thank you for the in-depth analysis. And I have to ask you, do you gain any benefit from providing a positive report or an agreement with the position that this is a safe place to build versus a negative report?
No, I mean, we are not civil engineers. I mean, I would see a benefit if I were to get a contract to design the library, yes, but that's not what we do.
Okay, great. I appreciate hearing that, and I think it's important for the public to understand that this is a very neutral, and we are just seeking information and wanting to know whether or not this is a reasonable area to consider building on, with the fear or the concern of sea level rise in the next hundreds and thousands of years. So thank you for that. So do you, and in addition, I was just wondering, and I'm sorry if you did mention it on page 1, but the projects that you have partaken in, can you kind of give us an example of some of the projects that you've been involved in evaluating?
Sure. I mean, the most recent one was done for the county, for San Mateo County. We looked at the Colma and San Bruno Creek, and we performed for the Coastal Conservancy a resiliency study to look at the effects of sea level rise on communities along both Colma and San Bruno in the watersheds.
Okay.
We completed a study, a long-term capital study for San Francisco Airport, to advise them to, for them to start planning for sea level rise as they continue maintaining their existing systems. So those were pure sea level rise resiliency adaptation studies. Along the coastline, we are helping the city of San Francisco at the present time and the PUC with the Ocean Beach
Great.
Shoreline. Lots of projects on the coastline that we do between our offices along the coast. Right here, we're doing for several cities, Huntington Beach. I'm leading that study. I'm leading a study for Santa Barbara. Mostly with sea level rise issues, identifying them and helping cities consider the adaptations that could possibly be include or should be included in their capital programs, rather than just rely on, we'll just have another measure to add a new pump station, which costs
Right.
$10 million.
Yeah, great point. On that note, I'm just curious if, we're looking at things potentially 30, 50, 80 years out, and I'm wondering if you foresee some significant geotechnical innovations that may help us deal with these types of issues going into the future. Do you see that horizon changing as we grow?
It's a two-part response, I would say, that yes, from a technical perspective, we are always going to see innovations that will help stabilize shorelines. Weak bluffs, weak geologic formations can be solidified, by additive or some other kind of measures. But along with that, I think there is a longer-term outlook for cities that is going to have to come in the next few years, not decades, but next few years, where their understanding of what should be put in the coastal zone or what should not be put in a coastal
Yes.
zone. Residential communities are by far the most vulnerable because there is no project life for a residential community. For a library or for a treatment plant, there are certain time periods over which costs are recouped and loans are amortized, but not in a residential development. So we just see, as a coastal community here, working with the Coastal Commission and other resource agencies, that we're going to see changes in the way cities plan their developments and their local coastal plans, their zonings, their master plans are probably
And
ripe for changes.
Right, and the better we understand our geology, the better and smarter planning that we can do going into the future. So I very much appreciate all that work that you're doing. And again, I did want to thank John for bringing up that point regarding the Pacific Institute. I've been reading that as well, and I think it's important that while we evaluate both of those reports, the report you've done for the city as well as the report we have from the Pacific Institute, that one does not include the seawall, and it just points and underscores the importance of having that seawall in that area in our community. So,
Yes, the city is going to, I just see over the next few years, the city will have to decide what to do about their seawall. How important is it? Is it an asset that, should be continued to remain there with the trail?
Right.
Or should we retreat?
that's right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Anybody else up here? All right, thank you very much. We'll go to,
I did.
You all right?
I did have a couple questions
Yeah.
for
Oh, okay.
regarding
Sure.
the report. John, do you want to?
thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, actually, these are for Lori on the financial
You're next. Let me-
report. And first of all, I just want to thank you for coming up with all these numbers, because you answered most of my questions from last time, and so that's good. I just had a couple here. One is on the $23 per 100,000 assessed valuation. Is that fixed?
No, actually, it shrinks over time. The if I understood the analysis that the financial consultant gave us, it starts out at $23, and then over time it gets smaller per assessed valuation. It's because the assessed valuation is expected to increase.
Okay.
So the amount that we need every year is fixed. So if you spread it over a bigger pool, then the number of dollars per 100,000 goes down.
So, yeah, it
Okay.
does. And so that implies that, that what is fixed is the amount per year.
The debt service, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's fixed
By-
by law? Or,
Fixed by the bond documents. It specifies in there what
Okay.
we expect to happen and then how it will work. But every year, we will tell the county how much we need to have them assess on the property tax bill.
yeah, okay, okay. Now, I did a quick multiplication of the amount paid by the average homeowner and the valuation, and I came up short. It basically $1.5 million a year, 45 million altogether over 30 years, and I'm thinking that the key may be either the assessed valuation of a single-family residence. In other words, you're leaving out other entities that pay property taxes. Is that the issue here?
Commercial property also pays an amount. What I shared with you is a single-family home.
Yeah.
Because that's typically what most people are interested in.
Right.
But yes, all properties would pay.
Okay, and so those will, yeah, okay.
So Kimco or some of the business properties in town, for example, would pay more,
Or apartments, for instance.
depending on what the property tax bill is, and yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Their assessed
Okay, so-
valuation is.
So that'll presumably make up the rest of it. Okay. Let me see if there's. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Irvin?
Again, thank you for the additional information and for answering those questions. I think that is very helpful. One of the questions I had was, so it was reported it's approximately $1 million a year to run each of the libraries. So how much do we pay annually currently to run those libraries, the city of Pacifica?
We pay zero, except for the maintenance, and that's a relatively, lot smaller than $1 million a year.
Okay. So do you foresee us having the ability to support both libraries, open, fully resourced, 7 days a week, with all the necessary resources?
I mean, if we were going to pull out of the system and just
We're gonna
have
pull out of the
city-owned and
system, yes.
operated?
Yes.
No, I couldn't offer a path forward on that at this time, no.
So if we were, for instance, to decide that what we wanted to do was modernize both the existing libraries, we wouldn't necessarily have the money to operate one of them on our own. So they would still, even if we modernize them, they would still need to be funded by the JPA.
Yes, the operations, in fact, we're very fortunate that our JPA does have sufficient funds to operate a library with a generous number of hours and materials, et cetera. So the answer is yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea if the JPA would continue to offer the current support if we choose to update and support both libraries?
I can't comment on that. They've not indicated to us an answer to that question. No, I don't have an answer.
Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to get a point. I know that's something a lot of people are interested in, is just keeping our libraries and modernizing them. And I know that we've done a facilities update and report to try to do just that. So can you comment on that facilities report, what are the needs of the current libraries as they currently exist?
Absolutely. And this facility report is on the website for folks at home if they are interested in looking at it.
And that's something we did have presented to us in November.
Last
Okay.
November, yeah. So it's insufficient in a number of areas that...
Could you speak louder, please?
I'm sorry. It's insufficient in a number of areas that the architecture firm came in and assessed. Accessibility, in other words, it's not ADA compliant. The entries are inaccessible. It just does not meet accessibility requirements. Life and safety, there's insufficient fire life safety features, under-supported cantilever of the building itself. There's a part of it that's cantilevered over open space. When you look at it from outside, you can definitely see it.
And I'm sorry, this is the Sharp Park?
Sharp, yes,
Okay.
Sharp Park, yes. Also, unanchored tall shelving, just a number of ways that it's not compliant with today's life safety standards. Building systems, it has insufficient ventilation, outdated lighting systems. We have recently updated the plumbing, that's a plus. And then architecturally, it's got uneven floors, worn finishes, poor acoustics, the hardware's worn out. And then functionality is simply too small. It's got inadequate storage, undersized spaces for collections, inadequate seating, inflexible spaces, and undersized staff space. And then technology, which is not called out here, is just cannot meet the current expectations for technology for wireless access, et cetera. So it's just not adequate to meet today's expectations.
And suppose, instead of looking at Beach Boulevard, we looked at renovating and expanding the Sharp Park. I know that was another consideration. Can you comment on the conclusions of that assessment?
Sure, that was part of this facilities assessment, and we asked the question, well, could the new library, as it's been envisioned, fit on either site? And for the Sharp Park site, the answer was not really. What they were able to do is fit a 4-story building almost on that site, but would not be taking into consideration the easement for the apartment buildings, et cetera. Plus, with 4 stories, 2 stories would be underground parking, and then 2 stories would be the actual library. So it wouldn't fit. It would be much more expensive because it would be on a hillside rather than a flat site. And of course, we did not ask for any of that information.
Okay. And one last question. Were there any other viable, I know it's been over a decade of planning and evaluating and exploring different sites throughout Pacifica. Were there any other sites in Pacifica that came close to being as a potential site to build on?
Not that we could identify that would be adequate for the size building that's been determined that we need. We did look at, for example, the parking lot next to the Thai restaurant that the city owns. That's another component that we, properties that we own, so we don't have to purchase property, which would add to the cost.
Right.
But we looked at that site, and what would fit there was something much smaller than the needs assessment indicated, and I don't remember about parking, whether parking could be accommodated on it, but maybe you could chime in.
Well, the site would be far too small on the surface to accommodate the building and parking, so the parking would need to be underground.
Okay.
And there's been no assessment as to how much that would cost or if that area is feasible to put underground parking
Okay.
from an engineering perspective.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think... Any other... Okay, I think you've answered all of my questions, and I'm sure the audience would like to speak.
Councilmember Keener?
Yeah, I remembered one more question. Regarding the low-interest construction loan from the county, and you envision that to be $5 or $6 million, so roughly a quarter of the construction cost that that is in the bond itself, right?
Well, the construction cost would not include the planning, the soft costs.
Right.
Or the furnishings and equipment. I
Yeah.
backed those out.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm interested in is the source of repayment, and you say either the bond measure or property sale proceeds. And I've sort of gone around and around in my own head about this, but it seems to me that if it's a different cost to us if you pay it out of the bond measure or the property sale proceeds, okay? And if you pay it out of the bond measure, then
You're paying interest from both the .8 plus whatever interest we'd be paying on the bond money.
yeah, that's true. But you have the property sales proceeds to apply to other needs, other library needs, right?
Yes, it's much more flexible in terms of what we could use it for the project, yes.
Yeah. And whereas if you repay it with the property sale proceeds, you have the total amount of the bond plus the amount of the loan that you have to pay back.
If I'm understanding you correctly, I think the county was envisioning that we might be able to borrow the money from them and therefore have a lower bond loan.
Uh-huh.
And so it wouldn't be additive, it would be instead, and that's why they offered it. Some other cities have been able to take them up on that offer because they have a different source of money to pay it back, but we don't.
So are you following that idea along? Does that mean that if they hadn't offered this loan, the bond would have to be even higher?
No, my understanding that the city has envisioned the library, unless, separate action on the council's part, that we would have the library be capped at the $33.5 million cost. Well, and so let me answer your question slightly differently. I've mentioned that I thought that the property sale proceeds and the county loan would actually be probably best used as a cash flow mechanism for some of the elements of the project that we need to have sooner rather than later, and to keep the, let's see, as an example, the bond proceeds can't be used to buy the furnishings.
Right.
The library JPA has pledged a certain amount of money toward the furnishings, the vast majority of it. But there would still be probably some amount
Right.
that we would need to purchase. So the property sale proceeds could cover that cost. And if we needed to borrow from the county to get that to happen, and then repay them with the property sale proceeds, that could be a way of using their kind offer. As I mentioned, it's kind of complicated, and until we sit down and figure out what we're going to need and how we can take best use of all the resources, it's difficult to answer questions completely.
Yeah, okay. I take that. Let's see, I had one more question, and it's flown the coop. So I'll stop.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill?
I just wanted to, there was a question from Councilwoman Karen Irvin about the JPA, and basically the JPA is committed to delivering either 60 or 70 hours, I forget exact which.
60.
60 hours to each city, and every city has one library. They granted Pacifica an extra 10 hours every year for many years because we had to, as long as we were working towards a single library. if we were to quit working towards the second single library, per the agreement, they would not have any reason to give us more than the 60 hours. So if we were, okay, and I would imagine they're right now, as part of their funding, they're also taking care of DVDs and books and furniture and all that stuff, and upgrades to computers, that would cease in the second building also. Because, you know, 1 million is probably just about the staff costs, I would imagine. So I'm just guessing at that part. But there is a limit to how much funding they're obligated to do.
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay, so I wanted to say thank you too to PCT for making the effort and for being here. I really appreciate that. And I'd like to get some air circulating in here, so if we could take a minute break so you can stand and wiggle and somebody would open that door.
It is open.
It is open.
It is open?
Ready to talk.
So if we'll stop for a minute, stand up and move.
Do the windows open?
No, you don't open the windows because they never close.
Oh, I see.
We should put some fans back in the ceiling back there. It wouldn't. I don't imagine.
Public input.
We have to vote on that first measure.
We have to get...
No, we have public first,
No,
right?
public comment.
But I think those are for the number 2.
No, we need to get public...
Well, okay, pardon? So,
Public comment.
right now.
Public comment at this time, so they can comment on both the motion to reconsider as well as the resolution.
Okay, then if it says library on there, do you think they're talking about number 1 or number 2?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's all one.
Okay.
So they don't have to differentiate?
No, they
Okay,
do
so, all right, so I'm going to read off 5 names. If you could line up so we go a little faster. Jessica Sayers, Sarah Sayers, Mary Brown, Chris Porter, Gail Benjamin, and Margaret Goodell. I will call them again, but if you could...
Explain it. 3 minutes, and they know the 3 minutes.
Oh, yes. And we're sticking to the 3 minutes, so if you can cut it shorter than that, looking at the crowd, that would be very nice. All right, go ahead, Jessica Sayers, right? Thank you very much.
Okay. My name is Jessica Sayers, and I understand the process for us to get a new modern library is for the voters of Pacifica to pass a bond measure. I will be voting in the presidential election this November, and I want to be able to vote on the library bond as well, and think it is important for the community to have a say. Please put the library bond measure on the ballot so I and other voters my age may have the opportunity to have our say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. Sarah Sayers?
My name is Sarah. I live in Lindemore, and I've lived in Pacifica my entire life, and I feel like we really need a new library. I'm a college student at SF State, and I find it frustrating that there's nowhere for me to study because our 2 libraries are so small and busy. I think putting this on the ballot gives the people of Pacifica the opportunity to let their voices be heard.
All right, thank you, and thank you both for being ready to vote.
I'm going to vote too.
We had our first vote years ago.
Well, that's true. Hello, my name is Mary Brown. I was a founding member of the Pacifica Library Foundation, and I'm here to ask you all to vote to put this measure on the ballot so that we can all vote on it in the fall. Pacificans have been working on solutions to solve the library problem for years. There have been so many polls done and so many options floated. We have finally come to a solution that appears to satisfy the largest group of people. We cannot please everyone. This town will always have a few folks on different sides for various reasons, but we know that and we still work together on other items. At some point in the future, the city will not be able to support the 2 libraries we have. When I was on the foundation, I watched as things were cut, cut, cut. Let's build one beautiful library building now while we have this possibility in front of us before our backs are against the wall again. Because I have been involved in the studies and seen the research that has been done, I do believe this to be our best option. Please give us the chance to vote on it.
Thank you. Chris Porter, Gail Benjamin, Margaret Goodell, Stan Zevin, Ben Ron.
I say I don't feel short. Hi, Chris Porter. I'm the general manager of Recology of the Coast, and Recology owns 2 significantly large pieces of property adjacent to where the new library will be built. We own the property at 2305 Palmetto. We also own property on the 1900 block of Palmetto. You know, I've sat in my office for 33 years looking across the street at what's going on there and seen quite a few different projects ramp up and then end up not going anywhere. The citizens of Pacifica have worked extremely hard on formulating the plan for the library. 5 years ago, I was in the council chambers when council gave direction for the library to be built at the sewer treatment plant site. So I think it's important just to move forward, give the citizens the chance to vote. If it passes, great. If it doesn't, then we'll think of something else. But let's not take that right for the citizens away. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gail Benjamin.
Good evening. I've been working for the San Mateo County Library in Pacifica for 20 years. And I want to tell you, very little has changed in those 2 buildings in 20 years. Okay, that's my little rant. I would like to ask you to please vote yes and give the voters of Pacifica the opportunity to decide whether they want a new library or not. It's not up to you, it's up to them. And I urge you to vote yes. You have all said at one time or another on your websites or during election that you think we should be able to vote, and we would like to be able to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Goodell, Stan Zevin, Ben Ron, Peter Menard, Ryan Michaels.
Hi, Margaret Goodell. Everyone in this room loves libraries. It's really, really clear. Everyone here agrees that Pacifica deserves the same services.
Margaret, can we ask you to be a little louder, please?
Everyone agrees that Pacifica deserves the same services as other residents of the county. Our librarians deserve excellent working conditions, but closing a library is not fair to half of all Pacificans. One library in either the northern or southern end forces us to abandon half our children. Half of our kids will have no easy access to librarians and information. Nearly half of our children will have to travel the highway for that access. At a time when we're trying to get more people out of their cars, this current plan that chooses to demolish a library will cause more, not fewer, car trips. Once bicycling or walking or skateboarding is not such a great option, will tired parents returning from work be willing to hop back in their cars for a trip to the library? Ironically, we'll be adding the greenhouse gases at a time when we should be reducing them. Remember that old Boy Scout motto, be prepared? Last winter's storms did not count as the 100-year storms that flood models use. But just imagine those storms on top of even a 3-foot sea level rise. Before we propose that Pacificans should pay for a library that may have to be continually defended from the ocean, in addition to what we pay for the bond and its interest, make sure you really consider closely the Pacific Institute and Our Coast, Our Future maps. The term underwater mortgage may take on a whole new literal meaning. We can hope that at best we have only 5 or 6 feet of sea level rise, But we need to think about being prepared for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. We both need to get really realistic, and we need to continue to use our creativity in this town, which is pretty remarkable. We really, really need to think in those terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Stan, 7?
My name is Stan Zeven. I've looked at the Moffett and Nichols report, concentrating on the sea level rise sections. First, the report didn't consider the effects of beach erosion. There is a very simple rule: seawalls lead to beach loss. Over the years, this beach has already shrunk, and this is without significant SLR. As I understand the process, a narrow beach leads to larger waves breaking closer to the shore with a higher wave run-up and overtopping, and this leads to flood extension eastward. Second, in the report's executive summary, the 2100 projections for the SLR top out at 5.5 feet, their worst-case scenario. However, the report chooses to only show that wave topping is, for the most part, limited to 40 feet from seawall. And I quote, "at its maximum reaching only the road adjacent to it," unquote. What happened this past winter is almost as bad as what they're predicting for 2100. Perhaps comparing what happened this winter with the flood zone on the FEMA maps might lead to some interesting new conclusions. And here's the kicker: the latest studies show that there could be up to 10 feet of sea level rise in 50 years. I'm not saying this will happen, but the residents of the city deserve to have as much information as possible to make the decision that's in their best interest, especially with the city asking for up to $66 million for the new library. The SLR report is a continuation of a group of studies commissioned by our city and Sea Highway Widening and Harmony One that can only be characterized as soft. By that, I mean they show best-case scenarios without discussing the real-world problems that inevitably arise. I have no argument with the figures from Moffett and Nichols' report, except for the above omissions. It's a mighty fine best-case scenario. My problem is that there is no discussion of probable scenarios where their numbers don't cover the range of future possibilities. We need those types of figures to make an informed decision. Now, in reality, I am absolutely for the library. I am absolutely against this location. A lot of things can go wrong, and they are not mentioned in any of the reports that I have seen. The other hidden costs that I heard talked about today that I didn't have written down is giving a seawall for 20, 30 years to help the people who have homes already. I understand, so I'll give them time to get used to the idea to deal with managed retreat. But once we put 66...
I hold it, please. No matter
not
what your reaction is, please keep it to yourself unless you want to wave your arms.
But with money that we put into
There's also limited time.
Well...
No, I understand. That's what I'm saying. You may finish your sentence because you lost your time. Go ahead.
But, now I've lost my thought.
All right, quiet, please.
Just a
This
second.
is what happens when we, get off kilter, so let's stay steady.
Oh, I got it. I have no trouble with a seawall for people who have their homes here and have been surprised by all this. However, when we put $66 million into a new building, we'll almost feel obliged to reinforce the seawall way beyond when it won't be cost efficient.
Okay.
And that's a serious problem that I know most people don't want to think about, but your children and grandchildren will think about it.
All right, thank you. So it does make it difficult to do timing when there's interruptions, so please try to be careful with that. Ben Ron?
Good evening. My name is Ben Ron, and I've lived on Rockaway for almost 39 years. I've owned and operated a land surveying business in San Francisco for over 35 years. We've completed projects including AT&T Park, the new Exploratorium, the ferry building renovation, Pier 27 for America's Cup, and Mission Bay. We're currently working on the new Warriors Stadium, Mission Rock, which is the new Giants development, and Pier 70. All these projects sit right by the bay and have been designed and engineered to withstand the effects of climate change. I'm up here to talk about the site for the new library. Two different, very experienced engineering firms studied the site, and we heard a great presentation tonight. And they came to the same conclusion. The presence of the beach and the seawall and continued maintenance of these elements limits this site to any exposure to flooding from tides, wave, and sea level rise. They were not writing about the coast in general, but about this very specific site, 2212 Beach Boulevard. Please keep in mind that the library will not be located where we're meeting tonight. This will be a new hotel or restaurant that is part of the hotel project. The library will be up at the corner of Palmetto and Montesino, next to Rusty Hook Bait Shop, Flory's Books, and Reflections Salon. The Coastal Commission has given its stamp of approval for placing a library on this site, and they're very conservative. The city owns the land, it is shovel-ready and large enough for a library that will serve our community of close to 39,000, and it's centrally located. After all, there are people here tonight from all over Pacifica. Our one middle school is right up the street, and I know that a lot of you have been coming here recently from every corner of town to visit the pier to watch the whales. This site works for the new library. I'm not a regular library user, but I will vote yes on the bond measure. That's because I strongly believe that a library is of great value to a community. It is open to everyone, whether you rent or own, whether you read on a Kindle or by holding a book in your hands, or whether you are a toddler, a teen, a veteran, or a senior. Librarians are there to help you sift through mountains of information, teach you how to Skype or download music, recommend a terrific story or a great movie, and are not trying to sell you anything. And they don't even say shh anymore. This is the right time and the right place. Council members, please vote yes so we have the opportunity to vote on the library bond measure in November. Our current buildings aren't getting any younger, and neither are we. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Peter Menard, Lisa Weiss, Connie Manafee. Oh, did I miss Ryan Michaels? I think it's Ryan Michaels, last name Michaels. All right, Peter, go ahead.
Okay. Mayor DeGree, council members, after learning of the revote, I thought maybe I should make a public comment and take a position regarding the library. But then I remembered the vote before you today is not, whether to put the library bond on the ballot is not in favor or against the library. It's a vote about whether our community will have the opportunity to discuss the issue affecting the library, or whether a technicality will be taken advantage of to prevent that discussion. The discussion I'm referring to is whether to invest in and protect the Sharp Park neighborhood near the pier or to retreat from it. In a perfect world, Pacificans would be able to vote on a bond measure to rebuild the seawall before the library, but that's not the opportunity that history has provided. It is, however, ultimately the same choice. Allowing the community to vote on a library bond measure in its current location during a presidential election year is the best way available for assessing what Pacificans want, protect, or retreat. A vote against placing the library bond measure on the ballot is a vote against hearing from Pacifica's citizen. No library bond vote in November means more uncertainty, more paralysis, caught between protect or retreat as the subtext for every decision made here. A vote tonight of yes, put the measure on the ballot, is not an expression of support for the library. It is a vote in support of listening to citizens. It is a vote for 3 months of democratic engagement. It is a vote for finding out how the Protect Sharp Park advocates propose protecting Sharp Park. It is a vote for hearing how the Retreat from Sharp Park advocates propose supporting residents and businesses impacted by the retreat. If the bond measure passes, yes, that leads to difficult decisions about how to protect the neighborhood. If the bond measure doesn't pass, it leads to difficult decisions about how to responsibly abandon part of a neighborhood. Both are difficult paths. But if we do not find out what this community wants, we are deprived of a clear direction to pursue. If one of you votes no, Pacifica will continue to not know what it wants to do, protect or retreat, and efforts to do either will be stymied. If I'm in favor of the current plan, I want a bond measure vote, but I have to persuade 2/3 of the voters to agree with me. If I'm not in favor of the current plan, I still want to vote, and I only have to convince 1/3 of the voters to agree with me. We do not want to be in a position in 2017 where we do not know what direction to go in because a council member didn't let us find out. So my comment tonight is really not directed to you, the council, but to Pacificans opposed to the current library plan. Please do not interpret a yes vote tonight as a council member not listening to you. A yes vote is a vote for you to be heard, and not just heard by city council, but heard by your fellow citizens.
All right, thank you. Hold it, please. All right, hang in there, folks. Keep it down.
Hi, good evening. My experience with the Pacifica Library.
Give your name, please.
Oh, excuse me. My name is Lisa Weiss.
Okay, thank you.
My experience with the Pacifica Library has been through early childhood education. For the past 3 years, my young son and I have regularly attended library story times and programs for young children. Bottom line, the programs and staff are superb, the facilities are not. At the children's events we've attended, there has not been adequate space to accommodate all of the attendees. And I should add, it was painful to hear earlier how unsafe the facilities are. And at both libraries, parents and young children have typically crammed into the small children's areas, with people spilling into other areas of the library. The computer area at Sharp Park, the patio and stacks at Sanchez, and I would like to advocate for updated, safe, and more spacious facilities for our children to help nurture their ongoing participation in the library's excellent programs and activities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Last person's name is Michaels. And Connie Menifee? What? Anna Booth and Teresa Dyer. Eileen Barcy. Go ahead, Connie.
Good evening, Connie Menifee, and I live in Park Pacifica. I live within walking distance of Sanchez Library. This lovely little branch library will forever inhabit a special place in my heart. My toddlers and I loved story time with the wonderful children's librarian, Barbara Amberg. But just as my now adult children have outgrown our little local library branch, so has the community of Pacifica outgrown the quaint notion of retaining two small, outdated, overcrowded branch libraries, each with restricted hours and reduced services. I support one centralized, state-of-the-art library at the old wastewater treatment plant site. The current coastal study by reputable marine engineers concluded that the proposed library site at Beach Boulevard is suitable for development. Mr. Keener, I resent that your personal agenda of advocating for managed retreat robs me of my right to vote on the library bond measure. Why should the happenstance of Ms. Nyhart's recusal give you de facto veto power? Contrary to your own campaign literature promising Pacifica voters the opportunity to vote on the library bond issue, by your no vote, you are personally responsible for disenfranchising the voters of this community. Please reconsider your vote. Thank you.
No clapping allowed, please. Seriously, this is a very serious matter. Thank you for those who are waving their hands rather than clapping.
Good evening, Teresa Dyer. I just want to say that Connie Menifee was out of order because when we come to the podium here, we address all council members, not one. Now, as I want to say, I also read in the Pacifica Tribune that our city manager, Lori Tinfo, said that this location is centrally located. Well, I disagree with her as well as her economic developer because I went to one of her sessions also. Centrally located would be more like in Valimar. But I'm opposed to this location. You cannot depend on Mother Nature, for one thing. And the other thing is, we have a nice library on Terra Nova that serves all the seniors back there on Odstead and Terra Nova. It has ample room to expand, both on the first level or to build up. Right now, it's a disgrace because it's not being kept up by our public works. Take a look at it. The landscaping, it's terrible. That's a beautiful little library. That's where it should be located. And I'm for one library. I don't think we ever needed two, but I disregard this location. I'm against it, and I will vote no. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anna Booth, Eileen Barcy, Vicky Flores, Celeste Chernicki, and Fran Quartini.
Good evening. I'm glad to see so many people here. So many people care about libraries, and that is wonderful. But we may be here until midnight again tonight, as we were the last time you considered it. I'm wondering why we are here at all. At your last meeting, you failed to give the proper 4-vote support to the same library measure. Why are we hearing the same measure again tonight? Why are we giving people a second chance to get it right? In my 20 years in Pacifica, we have never considered an agenda item head-to-head exactly the same. We're doing it because of Resolution ID 1995 from our mayor, who says, among other things, that this is a necessity. There's no necessity here. We've been talking about it in the library for years. It is not a necessity. Also, it says that you will need 4 votes tonight against it. I mean, in favor of it, not 3 as we have been told. It is still an item of necessity. You all still have to vote for it in order for it to pass, and I don't think you will do that. Because, as I have said before, you are taking some real risks. You don't know that this property will be free from sea damage in so many years. You do not build a building on risky property. You are also risking a lawsuit by a lawyer who is fuming, and he will sue you in Superior Court and hold this whole thing up till past the election, as was done on the widening of the byway. Why do you insist on having another meeting on this tonight? It's only going to make the city look bad. Now I have some questions about the city manager's office. This whole thing began as a resolution of the city manager, who does not propose legislation. She is a hired employee. She is our staff, our office manager, and yet you allowed her to propose this and pass it with no notification to the public. If I knew she was going to propose it, I would have gone against it. This is not a popularity contest. This is considering whether you have a right to do this, whether you should do this. It is absolutely wrong. Do not put this item on the November ballot, or you are risking a lawsuit in Superior Court. You are risking due process, which I've discussed. Do not do this, I implore you.
All right, thank you. Eileen Barcy, Vicky Flores, Celeste Chernicki. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eileen Barcy, and I've lived in Pacifica since 1970. I am a senior citizen now and enjoying my library more than ever, though I often have to wait for the types of things that I'd like to read or to view. So I'm aware of how woefully we are in need of an update. I want to take a moment now to be completely silent. Because that's what will happen to me as a voter if you do not allow me to raise my voice and speak what I would like to have happen in my city. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Vicky Flores?
Good evening. I come here this evening as 1, a longtime resident of Pacifica, and 2, as the CEO of the Pacifica Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to do my best to differentiate between the two as I address you tonight. First off, I'm glad to see so many people here this evening to voice their opinion about the library project, and I'm sure about other items as well. Because that is what a democratic society does. It listens and discusses ideas, requests, options, and goals. Then a democratic society debates and attempts to compromise and then votes on their decision. But what I don't see is this democratic process completely taking place here. Specifically, I'm talking about taking the community's right to vote on the library project away based solely on one person's personal decision and agenda. This sounds more like a dictatorship. Is this what the community of Pacifica has to look forward to? I personally would like to know what each city council member's description of managed retreat is, and if they believe that this is a solution for the city of Pacifica, specifically the areas west of Highway 1. Per the Coastal Commission description, managed retreat means do nothing and basically let Mother Nature take its course. Managed retreat means we would not build a new library, we would not improve Palmetto Avenue, we do not repair Beach Boulevard, we do not build a quarry, and we do not widen the Highway 1. There is no discussion, no vote, we simply do nothing. If any family homes or apartments are in danger of falling into the ocean, so be it. They will not get any support. I live off of Palmetto, so I guess that includes me and my family, huh? No support, no improvements, no compromised advancements. Well, this reminds me of a saying that a lot of people use when they don't care about others, as long as it's not in my backyard. If there is a city council member who believes and supports this description for the city of Pacifica, don't hide behind closed doors, stand up and say so. Because then I personally say to you that you have outlived your usefulness to this city. If you don't believe in supporting us, then we no longer support you. As the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, managed retreat means no support for Nick's Restaurant, which has been a staple in this community for almost 89 years. No support for the Moonraker, the Best Western Light Plus Hotel. No support for Holiday Inn Express. No support for all 6 hotels that spend their hard-earned money to promote this city because you do not have the funds or means to do so. No support for all the long-term businesses on Palmetto who have been waiting 10+ years just to get improvements that their hard-earned tax money has already basically paid for. No support for our local news media like the Tribune or TV 26. No support for Ingrid B. Lacey, 30 seconds. No support for all the businesses in Pacific Manor who, by the way, have waited almost a year for the damn post office to open. No support for Columbo's that has supported this community past 30 years. No support for the Chit Chat Cafe or the Bazaar. These are just a handful of businesses on Highway 1. Again, if you feel that this managed retreat is the answer for businesses in Pacifica, then the businesses in Pacifica officially say, we no longer support you.
I don't know where it is. Okay, hold it. Yeah, keep it down, please. Look at the number of people in here. We really can't go past the red line, and that's not fair, so we're talking about fairness. Let's keep that way. Celeste Chernicky?
Good evening. My name is Celeste Chernicky, and I've lived in Park Pacifica for 40 years. It's good to be back here tonight to talk again about favoring putting the library bond issue on the ballot in November. As I mentioned last week, I live in the Sanchez Library neighborhood, but I still have to drive 5 minutes to get there. It's not open 40% of the time that I'd like to go there. And the chance is less than 50% that the books will be there that I want because it has such a limited collection, because it is a small library. It's time for us to consolidate our resources and build a bigger and better library. We need a modern, new facility that has space for our children and our adults to work in, has places for library programs, for seniors to meet, for other groups to meet, for a tech lab. We need a library that is open 7 days a week and is staffed 7 days a week, so our children and adults can get the resources they want any day of the week and the help to find the resources and to use the resources. We need to take all of the money from the San Mateo County Library System and funnel it into one facility instead of dividing that money up between 2 inadequate facilities. I urge you to vote yes to put the bond issue on the ballot in November. If you have any doubts about this issue, let the people decide. Put the bond issue on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Jonas, Clark Natwick, Laverne Villalobos, and Tony Boykin.
Hi, I'm Fran Cortini. I've lived in Pacifica about 40 years, and I'm an elementary school teacher here in the school district for 20 years. We have a great school system here whereby many families move here to enroll their children in. We deserve a 21st century library to match those educational needs. Libraries help build knowledge, they inform, they offer a safe, quiet refuge for our teens, our students, everybody to study, to think, to mingle. And the new library will offer spaces for all these things, plus a dedicated place, not just for computers and books and music, but for our teens to meet, which we don't have right now. I personally live near the Sanchez Library myself, and I agree with what Celeste just said. Oftentimes I go there and I don't find what I need. I am willing to sacrifice my local and limited library in order to the common good of the whole community, to have one great library that has all the resources and pulls personnel all in one place. So it's not just for the students, it's for everyone. Please consider passing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Clark Natwick, Laverne Villalobos, and Tony Boykin, and, oh, I'm sorry, Linda, rushing you, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Linda Jonas. I think I've told you before, I've been in Pacifica living and working both for almost 41 years. And I'm on the Library Foundation board, and I've worked very hard along with a lot of other wonderful people to come to this point. My kids and grandkids live way at the north end of town, so I think they will be very happy with the new central library. And my main point, I guess, is that I've been a very active community person and working on lots of different good causes at SOFR. I have earned the right to have a say, whether this goes to a bond measure or not. So I'm asking you to please vote yes to put it on the bond measure on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Clark Natwick? Is Clark not here? Sorry about that. Laverne Villalobos?
Hello, City Council members. My name is Laverne Villalobos, and I am a parent of 4 teenagers and a Pacifica School Board member. 10 years ago, I was a parent volunteer at Ortega School in the library. I loved it so much that I decided to go back to school and get my certificate in library technology. It was there that I saw the love of books, the development of the library, and I also saw the negatives. Whenever my children had a book report to do, I would go to Sanchez Library, and they didn't have the resources that they needed to do the report. Oftentimes, we would have to change around what information they were going to use. We'd go to Sharp Park, and then altogether, I'd just take them to San Francisco Public Library or Redwood City. So I do see a need for one central, updated, modernized library where the resources can be available to make a computer lab with 21st century technology rather than behind. And I would just also like to ask the City Council to let the people of Pacifica decide and give them the opportunity to vote in November for the new library. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Boykin, Wayne Lawrence, Jerry Crow, Juanita Mercado, Bridget Duffy, and Robin Menelas. And if there's anybody else that would like to bring up a yellow card?
Hi, Tony Boykin.
As a Park Pacifica resident, I am concerned that there has not been consideration, financial evaluation rather, of the other possibilities. It was mentioned earlier that there's been no study of what it would have cost to look at the other lot by the Thai restaurant. I'm very concerned about Park Pacifica being left without those facilities. There's a whole school, those students. There's seniors back there, and there is so little public transportation that it would very much limit that. I always feel like in the arguments about this, there's an assumption that everybody drives. And so my main objection to this is I want to vote, but I don't want to vote on one option. I don't want this to be the only option for libraries in Pacifica. So, thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Lawrence.
Hello, my name is Wayne Lawrence, and I've lived in Pacifica since 1992. Now, I realize the board has a responsibility to the people to act in a responsible manner and to take a good, hard look at...
You need to raise your voice, please.
Speak up. I realize that the board has a responsibility to the people and to take a real hard look at what they get, the business that is conducted, and that's probably the foremost reason for the board is to get business done. Now, I'm all for a library, and to just kind of shorten this up, I can understand why people question the location. If there is a no vote tonight, I will volunteer to help shorten up the process to get this ball rolling. If a better location could be found, I'm all for that. I think that the business should be conducted quickly, because I'm all for a new library. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Jerry Crow, Juanita Ricardo, Bridget Duffy, and Robin Renales.
Good evening, council members and members of city staff. I'm Jerry Crow. I live in Lindemar. My concern is that we have access to the most accurate data when we're discussing the issue of sea level rise. Certainly an important variable in our considerations. Fortunately, these data are readily available on the internet. An example is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's website, which relies on satellite data. They report an average of 0.11 inches per year of sea level rise over the last 20 years. So that means 9 years gives you an inch of sea level rise at the existing trend. The University of Colorado publishes a figure of 0.13 inches per year, which translates to an inch every 8 years. National Geographic reports 0.14 inches per year. Actually, they report in millimeters, but I did the translation. That is equivalent to 1 inch every 7 years. These figures are significantly less than some of the projections we've heard from other learned sources. I hope we base our decisions on the most accurate, direct access to good data. Thank you.
Thank you. Juanita Mercado?
Juanita Mercado, and I'm here because I'm a graduate. My bachelor's is in geology. And the discussion on sea level rise just rubs me the wrong way, and I'll tell you why. Because I think this issue that we are discussing today requires a very deep analysis and very deep understanding of the data that you're looking at. I have read the reports that I have downloaded using Google search. Now, in this area that we are in, there is 2 bodies of water. You have the Pacific Ocean, which defines our coastline, and you have the San Francisco Bay that defines a different parameter as far as sea level rise. And that's because the geology is different, the landform is different. So the behavior of water is going to be different. Now, when I read those two reports, one by, that was mentioned earlier, and also by Scripps Institute, I noticed that any discussion on sea level rise that creates flooding was focused on the San Francisco Bay. And if you look at that area, it stands to reason, because that's an enclosed area, and there's a lot of low-lying areas around it. Now, do you, by your observation, see that kind of behavior here on the coast, when we have bluffs that are 10, 20 feet high? So the issue here on the coast is not flooding due to sea level rise. The issue on the coast is bluff erosion, which we have given some consideration, but not enough, I think. And the engineering solution to handle bluff erosion is going to be way different than handling flooding. And I hope you could give this a strong consideration. And this is why we need a library, and I'm all for it.
All right, thank you. All right, Bridget Duffy, Robin Renales, Joanne Bellinger, or Jean Bellinger, Dan Stejnik, Chris Fogel.
Ready? Hi, my name is Bridget Duffy, and I just want to reiterate what I see happening here. Just maybe I'm crazy, okay, but very, very, very possible. I am a middle-aged woman after all. And you know us, no hormones, forget about it. Crazy. Anyway, there was something passed around to try to get enough votes to get this put on the ballot. They did not get enough votes. But that wasn't good enough. The city manager had them vote on it. They got 3 out of 1 votes for. Turns out you have to have 4 to get this on the ballot. You cannot have just 3. So even though the first thing failed and the second thing failed, now we're here again. So who owns property on Palmetto? That's what I want to know, okay? Because this is all about money. And it's being turned into a divisive, listen to these people in the back. It's like a football game. We're not in a football game. We have 2 libraries. Nobody's against the library. This is a loan that's going to cost the people of Pacifica $60 to $75 million. We have 2 perfectly good libraries. We have people who need housing. We have a huge crisis in sea level rise, which, whether you want to believe it or not, is happening. All you need to do is come down here and look at the ocean. Between the erosion and the sea level rise, this property is not going to last long. Who owns property? I think this is something that I think everybody working in the city needs to face up to, the idea that they might have to come out of the closet and point the finger to whoever is manipulating our governmental system, our tax dollars, for their personal benefit. Because am I past my time? No, I have a whole nother minute. Get ready. No. No, I'm sorry. I'm ranting. I don't want to rant. I tend to rant. I am out of hormones, remember? But no, I want to say this about something else. I did a survey, an exit survey, just to any brave soul up there that wants to do a no vote. I did an exit survey. I couldn't find anybody that actually uses a library. And everybody lives in this area. And they don't really, when I asked them, are you afraid of losing, you know, it's being called a retreat from Shark Park. Why? Who termed that? Who says if we don't put $30 million in a tsunami zone, that's going to be an abandonment of Shark Park?
Okay, now you are at
It's not. It's not an abandonment. Sharp Park's the best part of Pacifica as far as I'm concerned.
All right.
And we just
thank
need
you.
to rethink how we make money from it.
All right, Robin Renales, Jeannie Bellinger, Dan Stednick, Chris Fogel, Lori Frater.
Good evening, Council. Robin Renales, 40-year resident of West Sharp Park. I live 20 feet on the other side of the east gate of the old sewer plant site.
Can't hear you, Robin.
I live 200 yards, off of the east gate of this plant site on the other side of Palmetto in West Sharp Park. First thing I'd like to do is give folks that support the library, as I do, and believe that it should be put on the ballot, an opportunity to stretch. I'd like to know how many people, if you could stand, if you're here in support of the library getting on the ballot tonight, if you could just stand up, please, so council could see. Take a little stretch. You can stay where you are. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you very
please
much.
repeat the question.
If you're...
I support the library, but I don't support the bond.
Okay, good, folks.
Thank
good.
you.
Good, good, good.
All
And
right,
thank you for raising
that
your
was,
hand.
That was for council's benefit.
Okay.
I'm asking that it please, for the sake of my neighbors, for the sake of the businesses here, for those of us that have a long investment in working to put together sound projects, recommendations, attend meetings, as I have done for over 20 years, to try to get something done in this neighborhood, to please give everyone an opportunity to vote on it, because as an earlier speaker had said, it's not just simply whether it's going to be the library here or not, it's whether you have the confidence that this is the area where we're going to see the projects and all of these things go on in the future. It means a lot to these people. A lot of us live within a block or two of the beach. So if you don't know by now, the people that live here would like to see the neighborhood saved. We would like to see the projects here. We would like to continue to have things happen in the neighborhood that bring people down and for our businesses to succeed. FogFest. Please invest in the future of FogFest also by putting this on the ballot. Give the city an opportunity to vote on it. Please, Mr. Keener, if anyone doesn't vote on this, I would really like to hear the specific reasons outlined and explained to me, please, and all the people that live and work here in this neighborhood, why. I really would like to hear that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jean Bellinger?
My name is Jean Bellinger, and these things always get so feisty near the end, and kind of like, okay, here I am, and I have all these things that I wanted to say, and then I get up here and I'm just like, I start to go into teacher mode. I'm a teacher. I teach at Ocean Shore School. I teach 7th and 8th grade. I just want to, sometimes people are a little bit unrealistic with their expectations and with what they think they understand when they read something on the internet. When I listen to the Coastal Commission report and I see engineers come up here and say this is a safe place to build a library, I tend to trust those people, but then again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just a well-educated Pacifican. Anyway, I appreciate the council members' hard work. I appreciate all of your work. I cannot imagine why you do what you do, but I thank you for it, because better you than me. And some people have tried to get me up there. So I just want to ask you respectfully to vote to put this on the ballot, because this debate right now isn't whether or not this is a good idea for Pacifica. I support the new library, and I will vote yes on this bond. But the vote tonight is to put the measure on the ballot so that we as Pacificans can argue, can fight, can throw things at each other, or whatever it is we're going to do between now and Election Day, because we deserve the right to make the decision for ourselves. So please allow the democratic process to proceed and vote to put this on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Please don't anybody throw anything. Dan Stejnik, Chris Fogel, Lori Frater, Robert Beckmeyer, John Beckmeyer, Pamela Whiston. Oh, I think I missed your last name.
Yeah, good evening, council members. Thank you again for hearing me tonight. I don't think anyone who lives on Beach Boulevard right now thinks they're adequately protected. We've got a $20 million quote to replace the retaining wall. We've got an $8 million quote to replace the pier. I did an analysis of all the pier costs. I think that $8 million is extremely low. Redondo's Beaches Pier is going to be $250 million. No one has bid on the $20 million to replace the retaining wall. If we're able to postulate that this retaining wall, seawall, is going to cost $28 million to replace, and the pier is going to cost $25 million to replace, we would breach the $53 million cap required for state of California emergency funds from single-day events. The consultant from Walnut Creek had stated that the average wave height was 5.8 feet, but we've had, this year alone, we've had 29-foot waves coming on there. I think the city attorney, they made a mistake. I think a bigger mistake that was made was the presentation that passing this bond measure could still preserve the Sanchez Library. I think that's an inaccuracy that probably should be corrected. The rest of my presentation, I'm going to talk about what we should do if this library bond doesn't pass at the end of November. I'd like to see a smaller library bond, maybe 10, 15 million, at a safer place. If it doesn't pass, if it passes, fine. If it doesn't pass, I'd like to see a safer place and a smaller bond, and something that saves the Sanchez Library. You got a lot of seniors up there, 65% on this poll think this hurts seniors. 67% of Lindemar residents near Sanchez think this is a bad idea. 71% think coastal erosion is the most important topic. 72% said no one else in their family had used the library in the last year. The city manager has a perfect record on library bonds. 2000, it didn't pass. Measure R, 2005, it didn't pass. Proposition 81, 2006, it didn't pass. 3 out of 3 library bonds the city manager has taken in Walnut Creek didn't pass. Let's look, and if it doesn't pass in November, let's make the size of the bond smaller, move it in, get a consensus here. Everybody in this room loves libraries. No one would put up with this ridiculousness if they didn't. Let's take a look. If the bond doesn't pass at the end of November, let's make a smaller bond in a different location, and let's see if we can get, a new library and keep Sanchez open. There's a lot of people that still use that library. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris Vogel?
Hi, good evening. My name is Chris Vogel. I live in the lower Lindemar area, and I come to talk to you about this library issue. And I come to talk to you about this library issue with respect. We've heard a lot of opinions tonight, a lot of strong opinions, and I certainly have strong opinions as well. As I get older, though, I learn that often the opinion that I hold is wrong. And in a measure that's important as this, I can't pretend that I know exactly what's right. I think, therefore, it's appropriate that this item go forward and be placed on the ballot so that 15,000 opinions can be tabulated. Because whatever our opinions might be, we may be surprised, and whatever that opinion we hold, we might find it's wrong, and that our fellow residents disagreed with us or agreed with us. I think the time for the city and the city council to have had their discussion about the merits of this project was during the last 10 to 15 years, when it came up during numerous council study sessions, goal-setting meetings, numerous agenda items. All these concerns should have been brought up at that time. And this is the time now when it's kind of transitioning from our city government to we the people. And I would just urge that you allow us to vote on it. If you're worried about a no vote discouraging the Library Foundation, it'd be my opinion that they know what they're doing, They've worked on this project very hard for quite a number of years, and they're willing to take this risk. If you shut this down and do not allow this project to go forward to a vote, just think of how that will affect people, and what their willingness would be to engage with the city going forward if they know they can work really hard on a project and just have it shut down at the last minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert Beckmeyer, John Beckmeyer, Pamela Charbonneau, Anne Desjarnet, and Tom Ball.
Hello, my name is Robert Beckmeyer, and I first apologize for the laptop. There was a printing error. I have lived in Pacifica my entire life, and I'll be turning 18 this August, and much to the joy of my mother, I'll be casting my first ballot this November. This November ballot holds a very special place in our family. Not only will it end numerous debates on what the running of both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders means and meant, but it also should be the end of a certain bond campaign that I have been a witness to since almost before I can remember. I can personally recall several school projects in that time that would have benefited greatly from the resources a modern library could have provided. And the thought that the city of Pacifica will be denied even a vote on the subject of that thought is a thought I find hard to stomach. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to make a comparison. My high school, Terra Nova High School, is quite a lot like our city of Pacifica. Just as our town has many political groups, Republicans, Democrats, environmentalists, my school had several different friends groups, football players, band kids, theater kids. While all these groups had different opinions about the school, you can always find people from every group in the school's library, just as you can find people from every political group of Pacifica in the Pacifica community libraries. My point? Libraries bring together communities of all kinds, and it would be a shame to deny Pacifica even a vote to build a new one. Ultimately, I think the next step in building of a new library, a central building in any community, should be left to a vote of the whole city of Pacifica and not be blocked by a vote of a small handful of Pacificans. I'm looking forward to my first ballot in November and voting for the new library, and I know that I am not alone in this. I'll leave podium with a simple message. Let the people vote.
Thank you. And welcome to voting. Did I get both Beckmeyer? John?
I guess there's nothing left to say. My name is John Beckmeyer. I live at 1163 Pellew Drive here in the Lindemar section of Pacifica. I've lived here 20 years plus, and here's the library card I carry. It's the Mountain View library card. Seriously. Why? Because Pacifica's libraries are small and cramped. They are noisy. The collections are, put politely, thin. I never know when these places are open. And all in all, they're just very, very sad places. There is a well-reviewed plan for a building that is spacious and well-lit and provides for different activities such that they don't impinge on each other. A space that would allow the current collections to be consolidated and more richly maintained. And a place that can be adequately staffed and be consistently available. A place that is not pathetic. If you say libraries are dead, then I challenge you to stand in front of the Millbrae or Mountain View Library and watch the constant stream of people going in and out of those libraries. If you say sea level will rise and wipe out the library, well, the same science that predicts the sea level rise is the same science that's been used to evaluate these projects. These libraries will be here for my kids and my kids' kids. I don't think we need to shrivel up and die as a town and a community while we await the next 100 years. If you say that it's not fair that it will be in the north end of the town, I tell you that's the tragedy of our geography. But we can't afford two libraries. Look at today's libraries and tell me they are a success. If you measure the success by the tenacity and scrappiness of their staff, yes. Our hearts and hats are off to these people. But the structures are hardly more than civil defense shelters pretending to be libraries. Close to two-thirds of our voting population wants a new library. We can pick apart surveys all day, incent, dissent, informant, ill will. That's the easy thing to do. What's hard is keeping the big picture in mind, rising above the fray and doing great things. Pacifica has doubled in population since 1960. Sentimentality aside, the library in Lindemar Valley, built in the 1980s, was hardly a solution then, and it's certainly not now. With growing households, our populace needs a proper library. Let's get rid of the eyesore, the dilapidated sewage treatment plant, and put something in its place that can serve as a catalyst for economic development of our downtown area. I encourage you to favorably receive the proposal and place the bond measure on the November 8th ballot so we can vote on it. Please give us a shot at a great library for generations to come.
Thank you. Pamela Whiston Charbonneau, Ann DeJarnette, Tom Ball, Ashley Larson, Ellen Ron, Brent Ritz, and if anybody else has a card.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Whiston Charbonneau. I've had a business in town here for almost 20 years. I voted for most of you, and I voted you to be forward thinkers. And I'm hoping that you think forward and put the library on the ballot. It's important. It's not only important to me, but it's important to my children and my children's children. We need a new library. It's time to put in the state of the art. It's time for Pacifica to grow, and growing is knowledge. So I'm really hoping that you rethink your situation about putting us on the ballot for the library. It's so important. I'm kind of surprised that it didn't pass to be on the ballot in the first place. I'm not really sure what happened, but I'm here in support of the new library, wherever it may be, and I just hope you're forward thinkers and understand that we need a new library. Everybody else said everything else.
Thank you. Ann DeJarnette?
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for putting in the energy. We all thank you for this exercise in civil liberty, which is taking a lot of time. I have been asked by another member of the Library Foundation to read an address, and she could not be here tonight. Dear Mayor DeGree, City Council, and City staff, my name is Trish Moran Scholl, resident of North Lindemar. I have spoken multiple times in this chamber regarding my ardent support for a new Pacifica library. I am unable to attend in person tonight, but I thank you for reconvening. 19th century American author and theologian James Freeman Clarke is credited with the following quote: "A politician thinks of the next election, a statesman of the next generation." Please let me repeat that. A politician thinks of the next election, a statesman of the next generation. I hope that all our city council members can take the viewpoint of a statesman. We have already wasted a generation trying to bring a modern cornerstone of democracy to our beautiful and deserving community. I urge all of our council members to do the right thing for this generation and future generations. Please put this matter before the Pacific voters in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Ball?
Good evening, honorable council members. My name is Tom Ball. I live in Pacific Manor, and I am a 15-year resident homeowner in Pacifica. In the interest of full disclosure, I am an employee of the San Mateo County Library, and from 2005 to 2014, I was the manager of the Pacifica Libraries. That I am professionally and personally in favor of a 21st century library here in Pacifica goes without saying, but I want to be clear that I'm speaking this evening as a private citizen. Although one comment as a librarian, I got to tell you, to see this many people here talking about libraries at this hour of night, I can't tell you what that does for those of us in the business. So thank you for being here. I have this brilliant speech I'm going to shorten tremendously. The one thing that pretty much all of 39,000 people here seem to agree on is that Pacifica is a special place. We're a creative nexus, we're an environmental gem, we're blessed with a high-performing school system, and we're infused with a spirit of volunteerism that speaks directly to the character of our residents and to their commitment to engaging with their community and for helping those in need when times get tough. In my opinion, a strong public library whose core missions are dedicated to bridging divides and promoting educated participation in the democratic process, that are housed in a facility that is fully capable of meeting the needs of this singular population, is an essential part of maintaining our civic character and spirit. It benefits everyone, in particular in ways that are particular to both the individual and the community as a whole. This bond measure you have before you is 17 years in the making, carried on by literally hundreds of volunteers and thousands of hours of dedication to the idea of and the reality of a modern public library in Pacifica. You can call me delusional, but I actually think that 2/3 of the voters in Pacifica believe that a modern 21st century library in Pacifica, not in Millbrae, not somewhere else, here, is a good idea and will be willing to invest in their own community and its future by sharing in the cost of constructing a modern facility. But we won't know that unless we get a chance to vote on it. So I respectfully ask you to put this issue before the voters of Pacifica so that we can determine our own future, as is our right and our obligation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley Larson, Ellen Ron, and Brent Ritz, Ron Mako, and Sue Vaterlas.
Ashley is letting me go ahead of her very graciously.
No problem.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Ron, and I am the president of the Pacifica Library Foundation. For over 13 years, the PLF has been advocating for one modern library for Pacifica. In my 6.5 years of doing outreach for the PLF, the questions asked the most often concern the cost, the site, and Sanchez Library. Ben already spoke about the site, so I'll talk about the other two. Let's start with the cost. $33.5 million is a huge number, but what does that number really mean for homeowners and property owners? As Lori mentioned, homeowners and property owners will pay $23 for every $100,000 of assessed value. If your home is assessed at $100,000, you'll pay $23 a year. That's less than $2 a month. If your home is assessed at $1 million, you will pay $230 a year. The average home in town has an assessed value of around $400,000. That works out to $93 a year, under $8 a month. And your assessed value, you can always find it listed on your property tax bill. Moving on to Sanchez. As long as we have 2 libraries, we will have limited open hours and small collections. One central library means having a building that is open 7 days a week for a total of 60 hours of access. There will be many more items to choose from and much more space for what Pacificans want in their library. When the new library opens, the Sharp Park and Sanchez sites will be sold. The money will go toward the new library. I hear folks speak of their fondness for Sanchez Library, and it is in a really pretty location. But what really matters is what is inside a library. Sanchez has no program space, no teen or children's rooms, no quiet reading or study areas, no enclosed meeting space. This small building has 8 computers, 6 tables, and 4 chairs where you can relax and read. It is only open 4 days a week. And the reality is that most patrons drive there. Sanchez Library is convenient for the people in the back of the valley, but for those folks to get to the Wednesday farmers market, or a drugstore, or a doctor, or a vet, or the community center, or possibly to work, they have to come out toward Highway 1 and generally flow north. So it doesn't seem that closing Sanchez will prevent them from coming to a centrally located library. There are ways to provide library access and services to the non-driving seniors and disabled who live in the back of the valley, or across from the community center, or in the Good Shepherd complex. Unfortunately, I have 9 seconds to go, so I really can't talk about that now. Please don't let all our hard work for a modern library go to waste. Please put the library measure on the November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley Larson and Lori Frater, I don't know if you wanted to come up, and last name Michaels. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Ashley Larson. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm a librarian here in town, but also I'm speaking as a private citizen, resident of Pacifica. Thank you for attending this extra meeting and for considering giving the people of Pacifica a chance to make up their own minds in November. Yes, the new library is an issue that many people on both sides clearly feel very passionate about. But the only way to truly know the answer to the question, does Pacifica want a new library, is to put it to a vote. Once the new library is on the November ballot, people will have 3 months to do their research, not about the half-dozen hypothetical other locations or scenarios that are floating around, but about this one location that has been carefully chosen, vetted, and researched by a team of extremely dedicated people for 17 years. I understand that some people think we're better off with 2 libraries, except we don't have 2 libraries. We have 2 half libraries, each with half the hours and staff and less than half the space, books and movies, and computers this town needs. Not to mention that having 2 library locations leads to all kinds of confusion and inconvenience. Almost anyone who regularly uses the Pacifica libraries has had the experience of going to Sharp Park only to discover that the book they ordered or the program they were planning to attend is at Sanchez or vice versa. It happens every day. You may think people won't like having to drive to one library, but they definitely don't like having to drive to 2. I have read many of the reasons why some people say they don't want a new library, that we need to fix the roads first, that we don't have the transportation services to support people who can't get to the library by car, that people don't use the libraries anymore. I can speak personally for that last one. People are using our libraries. Our programs and story times are packed, sometimes with more than 100 people. And every day people are checking out stacks of books, CDs, and videos and using the internet. As for transportation, most of this town does not live within walking distance of either library, and many people are homebound. The library already has a wonderful group of volunteers who deliver books to homebound seniors, and our library staff regularly goes out to visit the senior center and local schools and daycares. If our staff were not so thinly stretched between 2 locations, they would be able to expand those services to those who are unable to get to any library. Plus, I know the Pacifica Library Foundation is eager to pursue other transportation options to help people get to the new library, and it will be a whole lot easier to change the bus schedule or create a shuttle to get to one central library than would ever be to get to 2 libraries, one of which is fairly remote, and both of which are only open half the week. And yes, we do need better roads, and I only wish there were a team of citizens as dedicated and organized as the people on the Pacifica Library Foundation to make that happen. But we can't sit around waiting for those teams to magically appear before we act on this opportunity we have right now. I don't want to wait another 17 years for a new library. I want a new library for my kids while they're still kids, and for all the kids I read to every week.
I'm going to have to ask you to close. Thank you very much. Brent Ritz. Ron Mako, Sue Vaterlos, Lori Frater, and last name Michaels. I think it's John.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brent Ritz. I like to deal with factual data versus hallucinations. So we had the most noted expert here in the area just testify that we have a retaining wall on Beach Boulevard, not a seawall. And anybody can plainly look out there and see that we don't have enough revetment. I live there. The pictures that we're taking for the city were taken off my deck. I see this every single day. It's a very simple problem. I'll take my 1 inch in 7 years chance that the seawater is going to rise. I take a look at this property. This property is many, many years old, much older than I am, and I'm getting up there. But you know, anybody that feels unsafe here, there's the emergency exit right there. You might want to do a managed retreat. It's not safe here anymore, apparently. And we can't have meetings here anymore. But you know, that's just my common sense knowledge. You know, I've talked to probably over 100 Pacificans here in the last couple of weeks. You know, anybody that thinks a fool is a fool, you know, or calls them a fool is just a fool themselves. You know, they're not stupid. There is not a single person that I spoke to that doesn't want this on the ballot. Not a single one. So they see right through it. But I just thought I'd point that out. People I didn't even know. So there you go.
Well, thank you. Ron Mako.
On this second. Testing, we okay?
Evening, Ron Makel, Honorable Mayor, Pro Tem, Council, staff. I support a new library. I support any type of a nice new building in Pacifica. I think the last one we did was at the police station. But I very much support developing this site. As you all know, this property makes this neighborhood look like an industrial ghetto. You look at this buildings over here on the street over here. But I don't support the library on this location. I support a new library, absolutely, but I honestly believe, and I disagree with the city manager, I think that empty lot up there between the Thai restaurant and the new Pacific Historical Museum would be a great location, higher elevation, two-story building, upper story, all the windows with 360-degree views, you know, two-story underground parking lot. I think that would be big enough space. I think it'd be much better. We'd create a municipal center there. We have the city hall. We have our new Pacifica Historical Library. Then you have the other, you know, the rec department and the planning department, you know, having all that there. I think that, and then access is a little bit better off the highway. I think that is by far a better location, and I think that this site, I want to see this site developed and make money for Pacifica, but I think that empty lot that I'm speaking of would be far superior for a library. And so, you know, as far as the ballot goes, I don't know, it would have been nice if we had some options on the ballot, so we can not just choose on, you know, all this money, the bond money, but also choose on a location. We should have both elements of choice. But I honestly believe that higher elevation up in that empty lot, a municipal center, would be a better location. Yeah. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sue Vaterlos, Lori Frater, the last name Michaels, Paula Dexera, if I say that right, sorry. Tony Sladell, I'm not sure, I can't read it.
Sue Vaterlos. Ron Makel said that the site over by the Thai restaurant would work. He was talking about one story and community. This room, it would never work. It's not large enough. This is a large site. It's part of the downtown that we want to develop, that we've worked for years to develop, and this library foundation. The saying is, a great community deserves a great library. Our community is Pacifica. It's not Lindemar, it's not Park Pacifica, it's not Pedro Point, it's Pacifica. I live in the North End. I've never had a library. I think a central library is perfect for Pacifica, a new 21st century library. Thank you for voting on this, and let the people vote. It's a democracy.
Thank you. Lori Frater?
Good evening, Laurie Frater of Elmore. There are two parts to what I want to say tonight. Until about 10 or a dozen years ago, I thought of libraries as they were when I was a kid, you know, stacks of books. I would take my kids, they'd get the books they want, we'd take them home, we'd exchange them. And I had an interview over in Walnut Creek, and they said, oh, meet me at the library, I've booked a room. And I went over there, and I hung about afterwards and was amazed at this. I mean, it wasn't your father's Oldsmobile. It was a completely different place. And ever since then, I've considered keeping the automobile metaphor going, we've got a couple of Yugos. And you can paint them red, you can put tinted glass on them, you can put a rear spoiler on them, but they're still Yugos. We need a new updated library. And I would encourage anyone who was inclined to vote no to go and look at some of the other libraries around, because there's a world of difference. Anyway, the main point, I guess, here tonight is it's my understanding that the hotel and whatever else is going to be built, the commercial, revenue-producing, visitor-serving, tax-raising, however you want to describe it, is going to be on Can I stand down? Is that better? On Beach Boulevard, and that the library is going to be behind it on Palmetto. So I think that if you've got a developer who's going to spend 25, 30 million, maybe more, building something right on the sea, but investing their money to put something right on the seafront, why can't we put something behind it and have a new modern library as part of that whole development? I don't understand the argument about the whole sea level rise thing. Everything is a risk, as would be putting it on the ballot. But I ask you, please Allow democracy to function. Let us vote on it. Don't stifle democracy, please.
Thank you. Ryan Michaels? Paula?
Good evening, council members. I won't read all of this, it's getting really late. I'm politics there. I work at both Pacifica branches for the past 10 years, but I'm tonight here as a Pacifica resident on my own personal time. I live on Terra Nova Boulevard within walking distance of the Sanchez Library. I'm 100% in favor of the library bond, and I ask that you move forward to put this on the ballot in November. So I hear a lot of people say, I don't see anyone going to the libraries anymore. No one goes. Well, here's some statistics. Year to date, as of May, 86,975 people came to Sharp Park Library. 55,135 visited Sanchez. They are used. If we build a new modern library, more will come. We need one library open 7 days a week for all of Pacifica. Pacificas should vote on this. Please don't obstruct democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, is there any other yellow cards? Please bring them up.
Good evening, council members. I'll try to make this short since I'm the last person, but I have a point that's very different. I don't understand why 4 votes are required for this. It seems that the member who has been recused, their vote has automatically counted as a no. And I understand in an absentee situation that you count the total council members, but a recused and an absentee may not be the same, so I'd kind of like clarification on this. 2/3 majority of 4 people should be 3 votes, and why have we automatically counted her as a no instead of removed her from the voting process? So the interpretation that an absentee vote and a recused are the same, I'd like some clarification raised on that before we go ahead with the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Beckmeyer and Eric Rusames. Anybody else?
Thank you, council members and city staff, for your strong support of this project to date.
A little louder, please.
Thank you, council members and city staff, for your strong support of this project to date. Tonight, we've arrived at a critical juncture, the same juncture we were at on the 11th. After years of advocacy, planning, and focused work on the part of many volunteers and city staff members, you have before you tonight the decision whether to place a measure on the November ballot to issue general obligation bonds to build a new library. I urge you to vote yes, to affirm the work that began 17 years ago and give the citizens of Pacifica a chance to let you know that they want a new library for Pacifica. The folks in this room are prepared to launch a focused, dedicated campaign to reach the required 2/3 majority. Please vote yes to place the library bond on the November ballot. It's good for our kids. It's good for our community. Give the people the right to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Rusames?
Thank you, council members, staff. It's been a long, passionate night, so I'll try to be brief. 5 years ago in this very room, this city council voted to put the library on this site. Sue, you were there. Others were here too. That's what you're looking at now. We've done thousands and thousands of hours of work, consultants, staff time, community meetings, and that's what's in front of you. The new library on this site, and only one library in this town. And that council and every other council before and since has signed off on that. So that's what's in front of you. That's what's been studied, I think, sufficiently. There are always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people who say no. The oddity of California politics is we need 2/3 vote for the bond. The reality is we've polled it over 60% support. 60% is a gigantic majority. If all we needed was a majority, we'd be holding this meeting in the community room of a new library. But we had the oddity of needing 2/3. Now, we discover, unbeknownst to all of us, that we don't need just 2/3 of council. We need a unanimous council to move this forward. Now, I've not spoken to Mr. Keener, but I suspect that he was as surprised as any of us to find out that his no vote could sink the whole project after the last meeting. And I suspect, had he known that ahead of time, that wouldn't have been the vote. He has his reservations, which are fine, but I don't think that his intent was to sink the whole project. At least I hope not. And if we're talking about numbers, I think you see the turnout tonight of the constituency that wants the opportunity to vote on this project. You know, leadership is about bringing the community forward, not finding reasons not to do things, but finding ways to make things happen. This is a great community full of great people. I think we can challenge the national trend of just calling each other names and making up facts to support our positions, but we can work together and we can build a new library that we'll all be proud of. And I guess I'd like to see us move forward with a unanimous vote to support and put the library on the ballot, and I'd like to see a unanimous council try and make that happen in November. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't have any more cards. Gone. Okay, all right, so we'll close the public comment, and back to council. We do have one item here, well, two, I guess, whether or not to reconsider our council decisions, and that needs a 3-4 vote, and if that passes, then the next needs a 4-4, a unanimous vote. So I need a motion. Did you, Mayor Pro Tem, do you want it? You want to do it? No.
I can do it.
All right,
Okay.
Council, are you going to fight over this or not?
All right, I'll make a motion to adopt a motion to reconsider the council's July 11th, 2016 decision regarding the resolution determining that the public interest and necessity demand construction of a new public library and its financing through issuance of general obligation bonds, and if approved by majority vote, take one of the following actions.
Second? Are we good to call for the vote? Thank you. Please vote. Where's the...
Oh, you found it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that passes 4. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. And so the next part, I will also need a motion.
We want to, any conversation?
Will we discuss this whole thing? Yeah. All right, would you like to? All right, Councilman Keener.
I've gotten a few emails on this topic. Who knew? First, I want to say that all the emails have been polite on both sides. And second, they have raised issues and made me think even more about this decision. So, and, well, I'll come back to that in just a minute. I think I can skip over an awful lot of what I had planned to say just because it's all been said. Yeah, okay. So I had planned to sort of talk briefly about how we, or at least I, got here and why I voted no last Monday night. But I think I'll skip that. A fair number of you have an email from me saying why I voted no. So in the last 2 days, I've changed my mind about the library bond measure. And it was basically what you know, a lot of you have said tonight: let the people vote. Let the people vote this year. That swayed me. So, so I will be voting tonight for the resolution of necessity and other necessary measures at the next meeting to put the library bond on the ballot this fall.
For me personally, on November 8th, I will join those voters who would like a new library but think that the risk of flooding and sea level rise is too great for the Beach Boulevard location. So while I will vote yes tonight to put it on the ballot, I will vote no in November. And that's it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill?
I was just going to ask the city attorney, the one gentleman was unclear as to why we're here tonight and how we got to this part, and he requested that we kind of go over that.
Well, as I stated earlier, we're here because at the July 11th meeting, the council took a vote on this same resolution, and the vote came out 3-1 with one abstention. The resolution required, as we've been discussing tonight, a 4 vote of the council, as it requires a 2/3 vote of the entire council, not just the council who is present at the meeting. So upon learning that, I was in discussions with the city manager as to whether or not a special meeting could be called to reconsider the resolution. We determined that it could be held. The city manager then was in consultation with the mayor to determine that, in fact, the mayor did want a special meeting to be called. The city manager agendized it and put on this agenda the motion to reconsider the resolution, which you voted on and it passed, and therefore the council has the authority and the legal ability tonight to vote on the resolution that was before you on July 11th and is now before you again tonight.
Thank you. So I was going to make, did you have comments? Or?
I do, yes. Do you have comments? No, go ahead.
I'm really thrilled right now to hear what Councilmember Keener just said, and I'd like to really thank him for being so open-minded. I know this has not been an easy week, and but I'd really like to thank every single one of you that is in the audience right now, both pro and con. This is exactly what democracy is all about, to be able to be here and speak and be heard and to be listened to and debate. And we are never going to agree on everything, but just to have this vote go to the will of the people. I know all the many, many, many hours of work that have gone into this. 17 years of planning. For 5 years, this site has been approved by council. It is something that could be so wonderful, and I really, really want to commend the city staff for doing, and the Library Foundation and the Friends of the Library and the JPA, the county, everybody for doing their due diligence over the many, many years, exploring all the various sites and the facilities and this site, and providing such a clear and concise report tonight to alleviate potential concerns that people may have. And we have something that people can now go to, at least to openly explore what exactly we're looking at, and just be data-driven in your decision-making and really think about what we are asking for and what the consequences. We do have a lot of information at hand, and I just really want to commend everybody. This is a really wonderful experience, I think, for me personally, and hopefully for the community, and I'm ready to vote.
Okay, so I made a couple comments at the July 11th meeting, which I would like to reiterate in a short form. One of them was I asked the Library Foundation and supporters to be open-minded about the sea level rise issue, and that I definitely am always in favor of a public vote. I appreciate the public vote being speaking up, and for you being here as well again. And also for those that are concerned about the Sanchez Library, and I noted that I lived in Burlingame when we had the same JPA situation, and that the Burlingame residents found a way of saving their smaller library. I'm willing to commit myself to help in whatever way that is. That will not bother any other entity, just whatever that works out, whether it does or not. Then I thought of something, partly it was going over the notes of all the packet of July 11th, and also attending a county sea level rise meeting on the 20th, and I attended the Next Steps small group. And from there, I would like council to consider this. It's not earth-shaking, but I would like you to consider it, and I did ask the city attorney if it was A-okay. So council, I would like you to take a few minutes. I would like to suggest including another finding in the resolution that would require the city to consider the impact of sea level rising and any required mitigation measures during the design phase. So if somebody wants to pick that up for a motion, and if you want to take a minute to absorb it. See, I can't send this to the council because of the Brown Act. It has to be done in front of you.
I just have a question on that.
Sure.
I would imagine that these modifications are being considered at all times during the design, and it's part of the design currently that would go into consideration, that sea level rise issues would potentially go into consideration in their design. They'd look at the site and evaluate, create the design based on what was appropriate for that site, I would imagine.
Would you, I'll take a stab. Up till now, there's not been discussion of designing the library to accommodate sea level rise explicitly. And I can't really predict what will come out of the conversations with the architect. It would not surprise me if this is an issue that they will raise, but it has not been raised up till now. It's possible it could add some cost to the library. I can't tell you for sure today, but if you wanted a recommendation, I would think that that would be a fine addition to the resolution. And it would make sense for us to consider the impacts, the full impacts of the site as we move forward to design the library.
Sure.
Any other comments? Because I don't want to risk a no vote. I mean, I'll pull it if somebody has a hard time with this, doesn't want to do it.
So I'm sorry, John. Go
ahead, Councilman Keener.
Yeah. On one hand, this seems like a, sort of a laudable effort to insert this language as one more whereas in the resolution. Is that the general idea?
My recommendation would be to make it a new section 4 and then resolves and then renumber the remainder. So it would come right after section 3, and we'd make a new section 4, and it would read substantially in the form that the mayor just described.
Okay. On the resolution, not on the ordinance.
Correct, on the resolution.
Yep. Okay. Okay. On the other hand, my personal feeling is that the site has risk of sea level rise and flooding over the next, 60 years or who knows how many. We don't know when it'll come, how much it'll be. We just know that it will come eventually. And this, this may give us sort of false security I think I'm saying. But if it's incorporated into the resolution, you know, I'm gonna vote for the resolution. Okay, so let's see how this works out.
So I have a couple questions of my own. So what I don't want to do is put the vote, to hamper the vote, getting it on the ballot. I don't want to do any of that. So do you have, your light is on, do you want to say anything?
I understand where you're coming from, Sue, and I think, you know, sea level rise is going to happen, et cetera. But I also think that the professionals know that this is happening and it's going to be incorporated. I mean, when they're building a building, you know, like in downtown San Francisco, they dig deep enough to the point, and they find old ships and everything else, and they accommodate that because it's an on-site cost change order, okay, to do that. When we were remodeling the schools, we ran across change orders. So this is just a change order that will be a part of the project from the get-go and the design phase.
So you don't need an addition?
I don't feel we need an addition because at that point we're kind of micromanaging the project, and I know I'm not, you know, a lot of people think I'm not qualified for a lot of things, but I know I am not a civil engineer, you know, or a construction guy. So I would prefer not to have that in there because I think we have enough data. Staff, I'm sure, will communicate the concerns of council and that we move forward with the resolution as we have stated.
Okay, so my main reason for it was that I am anxious for the city of Pacifica to move forward on sea level rise issues, and I don't need to use this forum for that. I can be a pain in the neck on my own on that, so I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
All right, so Council Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill.
So I just clarification from city attorney, do I need to read the entire resolution?
Yes.
Or so I need to read the whole thing? Okay, guys, don't go to sleep. So I'm very proud and happy to introduce this resolution. Resolution number ID number 1995. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Pacifica, California, determining that the public interest and necessity demand the construction of a new public library and its financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds. City Attorney, would it be possible that each of us take a turn reading part of this?
Oh, no, you just had to read the title.
I just thought it'd be kind of cool. Okay.
Just the title.
No, that's the title.
So you made the motion, now we need a second.
Oh, I thought you said you had to read the whole thing. Okay.
I thought you meant the whole title.
Councilwoman Irvin?
I was like, God.
I second.
We ready for a vote, folks?
Yep.
There we go. All right. All right. So thank you, everybody, for your time and patience. We really appreciate your time and patience, and have a lot of hard work to do. Okay, thank you very much. I'm adjourning the meeting of July 21st. Oh, Lordy. I thought we would be out of here.
All right, I'm going home.